call. Seven Dials presents Big Beacon, a lighthouse rebuilt, a broadcaster reborn. Written and read by Alan Partridge. Forward written and read by Right Honourable Grant Shapps MP. From the Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. The ship was cheered. The light came on. Oh, how it shone as the keeper flicked the switch. It cast its spell. The rocks were quelled. The sea was now his bitch. By Samuel Taylor Coleridge, first verse, and Alan Partridge, second verse. A letter from the author. What's a dual narrative? Well, it comes from the words dual meaning two, as in dual carriageway or dual nationality, and narrative meaning story or narrative. It's a device you'll be familiar with from the world of film. In a popular movie, we might follow a character in childhood and then see that same character played as an adult by Keira Knightley. And of Knightley, we'll spend that hour thinking, quite rightly, and excuse my language so early in the book, what the fuck is this? People simply don't sit in a movie they're not enjoying, not in a cineplex that has air hockey on site or 10-pin bowling alley next door. You have to grab them by the short and curlies, brackets, pubes, and enthrall them from the get-go. If not, they'll vote with their feet and skedaddle. No disrespect to the child actor, I'm sure they're very good. They've been in Holby or the stage version of Matilda, but we're here to see Knightley. We want Knightley. Where's Knightley? How does a filmmaker square that circle? How can he, or increasingly she, incorporate the childhood section of the story without angering the Keira-hungry audience? They do it by using a dual narrative. The filmmaker can flit between the two at will. Bit of the child actor, bit of Knightley. Bit of the child actor, bit of Knightley. Oftentimes, love that word, they'll pop the date on screen to indicate to the audience that they've swapped from one period of time to another. It's something we've all seen, and if you're thinking, doesn't ring a bell, trust me, you've seen it, you just can't remember right now. Footnote. Dual Big Beacon, each strand of the dual narrative will tell a different story of resurrection. One follows the pursuit of a simple dream, the struggle to resuscitate a career as a TV personality. Will I succeed? Footnote. Spoiler. Yes. The second follows a very different quest, one in which I spurn the world of broadcasting for a more humble life spent restoring a dilapidated lighthouse, and, in a funny kind of way, my own soul. A simple rule of thumb is that the chapters alternate between the narratives. So it goes TV career, lighthouse, TV career, lighthouse, TV career, lighthouse, TV career, lighthouse. You get the idea. If you read the book, it's really quite easy to follow. You come to realize that if you're reading about my TV career, the next chapter, it's really not that hard. My assistant's read it, and she doesn't even have an O-level. Prologue. 2 candy flossers, please. I sniffed deeply and let the sticky air waft up from the drum and fill my nostrils. I've always enjoyed the taste of these sugary pink puffs. Buy them whenever I see God. She is one delicious lady. It's the 11th of June 2021. The fun fairs come to Chapelfield Gardens in Norwich, and we are going to rock. I've enjoyed the evening so far, nodding at people who recognise me from my BBC One show this time, and just forgiving those who don't. Footnote. For those who are interested and do want to approach me, hey Alan, where's Jen? Is bad. Mr. Partridge, sorry to bother you. I don't want a selfie. I just want to say nothing more than I admire and respect what you do. This is good. I've come with my dog, Selden, to stretch A, his legs, and B, the patience of everyone else at the fun fair. Selden's a rambunctious presence, preferring to walk through people rather than a shoulder-concealed harness fitted with an emergency ripcord. Footnote. After some trials in the field using a quad bike as a dog substitute, this emerged as the best solution. But the fact is, he becomes more cross if left alone in the house. Of course I prefer to come to the fair without him, but when I got home the other year, he smelled fried onions on my clothes and went berserk. Joe Rock, E.G. Mumford and Sons. I think everything will be fine. The vendor hands me my flossers, and I hold my card against the contactless console to pay. Feels odd using a modern payment system to buy a snack that should have been banned in about 1970, but no one else raises an eyebrow, so I just chuckle and stroll. I look round for Selden, but there's no sign. He's probably gone to feast. I wait for a minute for him to return, allowing myself a brief daydream in which he meets a female dog who just gets him and is able to bring out his softer side, the two of them eventually living at the Oast House with me, so wrapped up in each other that I can have visitors again. Another minute passes. I've finished my floss and his is beginning to droop. This isn't like... I start to walk around, calling Seldom's name, gently at first, but then more urgently. Seldom! Seldom! Another minute passes. I'm frantic now. Where is he? I'm stopping people. Have you seen my dog? He's big and brown. I don't know. He's just big and brown. But no one's seen him. Now I'm wrong. Like the nearby town of Sheringham, he welcomes careful drivers only. Seldom! Where are you? I hand his candy floss to a young boy whose mother tuts, oh fuck off, I think, and hurtle through the throng of giggling families. I'm spinning round, the funfair now a blur of neon and tat. And then I see him, lying peacefully a few yards apart me to wipe onto my trousers any trace of candy floss. I smile and walk towards him. He's having a nap in between the helter-skelter and the waltzers. Where the hell did you go, you daft bugger? I say, although I skip the hell and you daft bugger bits. He's not moving. I approach and make a clicking noise with my tongue like a Geiger counter so as not to... I stare at him. He's not breathing. Something's wrong. I push him hard to the acid test. Either he retaliates with extreme prejudice, or he's dead. Oh my God. I think he's dead. I know in that moment, the image of this hulking dark form next to the lighthouse-shaped slide would be seared into my brain. No, Seldom, please. Seldom. No! Seldom! Two fairground workers look over, resembling a pair of thick-set Morrises. We can shift in, no problem, says one. We've shifted bigger weights than that before, and it suddenly hits me. He's gone. I howl at the heavens. No! I see the blue rising ever higher, as if his very soul is taking flight. Seldom! 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 I realize a woman is standing next to me, handing me back the candy floss I'd gifted her son. I take it, wait for her to leave. Then, before the tears begin, I plunge my face into it and eat. Chapter 1. Something odd in BBC Broadcasting House with an almost rhinocerine confidence. It's 10 days PS, most seldom. And he's a presenter at the top of his game with no idea he's about to lose even more than he's already lost. I'm going to need breath mint, a big banana, and some coffee. The man is I, Partridge. Calf or decaf? My assistant whole-year-olds, earning its money with every step. Calf. No, decaf. No, calf. Extra calf. Maximum calf. I want the amount of caffeine Jason Statham would order. So it's a very strong black coffee. Precisely, a very strong black coffee with milk. It's an hour after we've aired for BBC One and representatives from the Corporate Communications Department and HR. I am not surprised. Moments earlier, I had created a nationwide campaign, exactly the kind of big tent idea the badly listing show badly needed. All of a sudden, the big dogs got shit to talk about. Fast I stride, faster and faster to raise money for needy kids, we get it, and maps of fire exits and muster stations. I begin to perspire. My assistant, whose nostrils are attuned to detect any fluctuation in my odour, looks up at me. Roll on, roll on. She hands me the Mitchum antiperspirant, and I reach under my untucked shirt to slather it beneath my left arm. I hand the tube back to her and raise my right arm for her to do Wasp's nest from the side of my house using an old swing ball I'd found in the shed. Wielding the pole like a medieval mace had been incredibly satisfying. The tennis ball end acted as a miniature wrecking ball and pissed the wasps right off, but it had played merry hell with my shoulder. My assistant does as instructed, removes any hairs from the applicator ball and replaces the lid. But popular system she already understands from the world of tea bags. On this occasion, she squeezed the coffee bag a bit too hard, and it's ruptured, leaving a layer of sedimentary silt at the bottom of the flask. Still, she's a good worker, and she was only trying to extract maximum flavour from the bag, albeit cack-handedly. Besides, I'm in a very good place, for in the last few minutes of the show, something special waves and/or inroads across the nation. I am hopping mad, and I want something in the middle. 11 words, 42 letters. One hell of a rally cry, uttered by me live on BBC One at 9:26 p.m. on the 21st of June, 2021. This primal scream landed in an echoey TV on the cables into the nation's living rooms, where it prompted a very different reaction. And suddenly, boom, everything changed. Odd to think I'd said these words just a week earlier, after a hairdresser had left a big gap in my fringe. Then no one had batted an eyelid. Yet these very same words, delivered down the lens of a camera, encapsulating the frustration of the view. It was a simple call for reasonableness, pithy, clear, and almost musical in its rhythms. There was a poetry to these words that made them resonate and linger. Ross Kemp said later he was pretty sure they were a haiku, but he wasn't certain. And the sentiment itself, the rejection of extremism, plus a request to have more programs on TV like Good at Feeling. The public was the ground, I was the swell. Revisionists will try to understate how seismic this was, and that's cool. But the facts are these. In the days that followed, I Am Hopping Mad and I Want Something in the Middle became every bit as ubiquitous as Hands, Face, Space, or my personal favourite, See It, Say It, Sorted brackets, skilled, semi-skilled and unskilled manual workers. Trust me, that heady summer those words were everywhere. You couldn't move without seeing them retweeted by a single dad who likes the England flag, or chanted by a gaggle of aggressive mums outside a Portsmouth school. For 3 weeks, they were daubed on a motorway bridge on the M6 as you approached Preston. These that have been fractured by one brother sexting another brother's fiancé, a gran saying something overtly racist to a grandson's mixed-race girlfriend, or an uncle grabbing a nephew by the collar because he sneered at Brexit, could finally sit down for a roast dinner and say, "Hey, what about that something in the middle campaign?" For the first time, I was the face of something, the leader of a people, and I'm the streets of Galilee. I had heft. We arrive at the meeting room. I enter. I don't know it yet, but I'm walking into an ambush, an HR mugging in which I'll be told I've completed my final television appearance. My last ever episode of award-winning BBC magazine show this time. Footnote, check. I am effectively going to be crucified like Howard Newman, the show's producer, is avoiding my eye, not to mention my hand, which now hangs in the air as limp and redundant as the mistletoe in Rob Little's conservatory. I slowly lower it. Footnote, my hand, I mean. Rod's mistletoe has been up since 2010 and gone black. I know this is a bad sign. No five should ever go unhied. My rotator cuff attacking a Burton shirt, a coterie of panicky pen pushers covering arses and baying for blood. Howard speaks again. I think we need to look at your role going forward. I nod, unless intelligent mind might have processed this as they want to look at me role going forward, and launched into a judo roll in the middle of the meeting room. But although slightly panicking, I towards Howard, it's obvious to me that the role is too big for him and he's struggling. He joined the corporation from E4, the channel famous for bringing Japanese stunt show Banzai. Well done them, but Banzai was 22 years ago. What have they done since? Nothing. This is not what I expected, and certainly not what I deserved. I have sat on the famous sofa hundreds of times and been unlawed difficult concepts such as inflation or the House of Lords. Away from the studio, I've been a passionate defender of both the show's output and the BBC's wider public service remit, and will confront critics at dinner parties, putting them straight on a few things, and once even loosening the top of the salt cellar so that a guy from the Times had his risotto swamped with excess seasoning. And from the Times, but I'm certain the audience won't have noticed. In that studio, I'm a watchword for unflappable professionalism. There's a serenity to the way I broadcast. Amol Rajan says that I'm like a swan in a suit. And this is a man who knows about a breezy style of broadcasting, since he has a chronic mumble and lazily runs 2, 3, sometimes 4 words together at a time. real life, he couldn't be clearer, and as a clipped manner reminiscent of the speaking clock. Was it all plain sailing? Have I been 100% perfect? Yes. So it feels a bit odd, not upsetting, just odd, to be here in a room full of concerned voices and even concerneder faces. Howard, however, seemed embarrassed, the croissant-haired royal. I chuckled calmly. This is Her Royal Highness, the Princess Royal Princess Anne we're talking about. She has 3 brothers who are more than capable of doing that, from Prince Andrew and Prince Edward to our new King, Prince Charles. But Howard is now saying I've made the show look bad. Interesting. Made them look bad? Did I make them look bad when I launched Britain's fittest PE teacher? Did I make them look bad when I and the This Time Pickup Squad collected discarded cans worth £125 and used the cash to carpet a scout hut? Did I make them look bad when I dressed up as Pudsey Bear for children in need, lending a spry physicality to the partially sighted teddy bear? Show with spontaneous riffing. For example, Jenny is able to tell an anecdote about yoga if one occurs to her, which it does maybe 8 times a month. Or she might nudge me playfully without my prior say-so. Or she might add a bye-bye, even though Alan says goodnight is the last line on the auto cue. Things like that. We can't have this, drones Howard. Today was meant to be a special show, and as I'm hopping mad and I want something in the middle, he scoffs. I mean, what was that? It was a campaign to improve the BBC, I say. Yeah, with your face all over it, he scoffs. My voice lowers to a croaky hiss, like the sister's boyfriend from Happy Valley. You might be surprised, Howard, but for some of us, broadcasting isn't about boosting our own profile. It's about, and not for a high five. HR will be in touch, he says. But listen, thank you. You're sacking me. You can't do that. I can, as a matter of fact. Just think of it as a chance to spend more time with your, dog? Well, yeah, dog's dead. The snapping reminder of Selden's face discharges of drowned modesties, helping me to roll his body into the jaws of a digger. The futile call with taxidermists, both here and abroad. The consequent decision to lay him to rest and ringing the fairground lads to ask to borrow the digger again. The giant heaving sobs as I knelt at the graveside, using my own arms to doze huge mounds of earth back into the grave. Footnote, and actually quite efficient. The sullen days thereafter when I'd unthinkingly tossed bits of food onto the floor, only for them to sit there, unsnaffled. Footnote, even now I don't feel up to writing about those dark days, about how Selden's death contributed to my unravelling, and I don't think I'll be ready to discuss for some time, certainly not until around, say, the chapter XX, after all, a grieving man. And many a BBC employee has escaped redundancy for less. IBS, anxiety, mild IBS, I think I might be gay, repetitive strain injury, had a bad dad, so sad. The BBC knows it has to take complaints seriously. Ever since Operation U-Tree, management has become, I hesitate to say touchy-feely, and that was the bloody problem. Resign, mate. Drafted the letter this morning. Let's have a look then. It's not on me. It's in my bag. Your bag's next to you. My other bag. Didn't know you had 2 bags. Got 6 bags. You want to go and get it then? Nah, I think we're done. On that, I'm instructed to hand over my lanyard and pass. A brutally cold sayonara, similar to how I imagine him landing near the door. She looks startled to see me, but that may be the Botox, because she does use Botox. Hi, Alan. Sorry, just on a call, she says, pretending to be on the phone. There's no one on the phone. I'm not stupid, I say. She opens her eyes wider, or tries to, her eyebrows fighting their way through the huge tracts of Botox in an attempt to look quizzical, and I say sarcastically. Hello, says a voice. Who's this? Liz Gresham. Who's she when she's at home? I bark. Jenny's mum. You must be very proud. I'll hand you back. I return the phone to Gresham. Happy, she says. Ecstatic, I say. Then when she's gone, I had a whispered, you fucking cow. Which, and I can hold my head fairly high. Yes, a good day, all things considered. What these people don't seem to realize is, I've already left. My departure came an hour and a half ago when I'd had the camera follow me out of the building, swapping the cold straitjacket of the TV studio for the warm embrace of the public. That was my goodbye. Yes, seen striding down Regent Street, swinging his big arms and humming a rock song. Oh, I am gone. I am out of here. It's a shame to be leaving the BBC at a time when most of its senior roles, both exec and non-exec, are finally being given to supporters and donors of the Conservative Party. But leave I must, or rather, left I have. Chapter 2. The Kraken Awakes. It was the year of our Lord, 2011, and I was about to build a TV career. Footnote, this is the dual narrative thing I was on about. To explain how, we must go back to a time when I was a broadcaster marooned on local radio. Come with me, come back down the years, for we float down through time and space, and also in mid-air to 2011. And we've landed. It was January. North Norfolk Digital shone brightly in the Norwich dinge, an incongruous glint of glamour on an otherwise unattractive face. Like Rudolph's red ears, the station had imbued the city with an unmistakable elan and was regarded locally as an oracle of what was cool. No one in Norwich liked Ed Sheeran until we put him on the playlist and said, check out this kid, he's special. We were kingmaker, arbiter, judge and jury. What we said mattered. If we said Chunky Knitwear is hot this season, sales are 1-9. If we said apparently goat's cheese contains salmonella, shoppers would avoid it and boycott goat products more widely. If we'd said there's a tailback on the A40, by God would people avoid the A40 and find alternative routes. We had clout. Trust me when I say, /write, there wasn't a broadcaster in the land who wouldn't have been creatively satisfied by the competitions, throws to news and fun features. The jingles alone were occupying huge amounts of brain space, and new jingles, like a man who's consumed too much Viagra and corn flour, were coming thick and fast. Footnote, have to try stand-up one day. Such that I was able to turn almost every sentiment I needed to utter into a short, catchy song, from majority to... I was partnered by my on-air friend and real-life acquaintance, sidekick Simon. Ours was a creative partnership at its most vital, the radio equivalent of Simon and Garfunkel in the 1965-70 golden era. But with him as Garfunkel and me as Simon. I, Simon, provided the creative engine, and Simon, Garfunkel, harmonizing with what calling or texting sidekick Simon frequently through the day and night, eager to share whatever new idea I'd come up with as soon as possible. And for his part, Simon would text me with ideas he'd had. One or two would fit the bill and find their way into the tail end of the show. Others were interesting but tonally wrong. Should we legalise cannabis would have been incendiary to a Norwich listenership, and many other but not quite right filter. Still, together we cooked up a pretty special show on a pretty special radio station. That was before. Fast forward 3 months, and there had been a sea change at the landlocked radio outfit. One day, waiting for the traffic lights to change on the drive to work, I caught sight of myself in the window of a tanning shop. The reflection of the pleasant chub of my cheeks and lips had given way to a pinched, angular quality, like a wooden crow. What had changed, I wondered? Where was the cheery broadcaster who used to drive to work singing popular songs at the time? Back in the day, I'd drive to work full of vim, entertaining myself with a neat game I called Speed an Hour, if in a 30 zone, and the second it became 40, I'd zoom to close up the 10-mile-per-hour shortfall before hovering there, praying to God Almighty that a tractor wouldn't pull out and ruin the game. If that sounds less than thrilling, think again. Passing through a rural village containing a primary school would see me slam on the anchors, screeching down from the 60-mile-per-hour national speed limit at the town limits. You'd better believe it, I'd get up to 60 again just as soon as I could. It was daredevil exhilaration, and the best thing was, it was 100% legal. But there was a sullenness to me on this drive. Something at North Norfolk Digital had changed. No longer the beating heart of the Norfolk music scene, it had vacated its HQ in a prime central HQs that sat empty because no serious corporation wanted to plonk themselves on a site marooned so far from a town or motorways. It was a poorly planned development. A long road punctuated every 30 yards by yet another mini roundabout. These annoying white mounds coming out of the track like beads of my assistant's rosary. the demand, which is why I used to simply drive over them, until the owners in their wisdom put paid to that, replacing the painted mounds with flower beds. The drive had consequently become a painful stop-start affair, and I never didn't arrive at work in a bad mood. Why on earth did we move? I'd often find myself in the middle of nights looking up at the building, the beautiful relic of our once glorious past. Although I'd never seen inside such a place, I could nonetheless imagine the walls echoed to the sound of Eddie Shepherd coughing news into his microphone. Barbara Bickerton recounting one of her long stories. Yours truly telling a single mum she has won £50 of Iceland vouchers. Or the ghost of Wally Banter haunted. And now here we were, so far out of the hustle and bustle of Norwich life that we might as well not exist. It was largely for this reason that North Norfolk Digital was locked to the spiral of decline. The move also had a disastrous effect on the quality of guests we were able to attract. It's one thing to convince Joe Wicks or Sandy Toksvig to say, "He could take your coat to the dry cleaner as well if you want," we'd say. But if you think Joe Wicks is going to sit in a minicab for 20 minutes to come and talk about kettlebells, forget it. Ain't going to happen. Sandy would still come, but she would not be happy about it, and my God, that came over on air. You'd quickly realise why her agent called us Sandy Toxic. Suddenly we were no longer treating listeners to job invented only in the last few years. Influencers are young people, typically aged between 15 and 25, who post short online videos multiple times a day in which they speak quickly and loudly about themselves. For reasons that aren't fully understood, this doesn't infuriate other young people, it attracts them. They come to trust and listen to the views of these young people who speak quickly and inside of, rather than inside, or super excited rather than very excited. Businesses pay these influencers to endorse their products, and it works because millennials would rather follow what they're told by someone who has no expertise about a product and is only endorsing it because they're being paid to do so over the views of a professional reviewer at a reputable publication providing an Instead, we were desperately filling airtime with a man who'd got an ASBO for practicing his tuba, or personality-less local wine expert Rosie Ritter. One day our star interviewee was a man from Dino Rod, who was only in the building because the disabled toilet had backed up. Turned out he knew a lot about fatbergs, which, to be fair, was actually quite interesting issue. Not to mention an air conditioning system that made a noise so persistent that you continued to hear it long after leaving the office. So you'd find yourself frantically fingering your ear hole at home or all while on a date with a woman, and you'd have to pretend you'd got water in from the swimming pool. Would you put up with that? Would you stand for the greyness, the round twisted? I relaxed into the folds of the rut I was in. The dreams I'd had began to extinguish and sputter. Not all at once, but one by one, gradually, like the candles on an asthmatic child's birthday cake. You come to accept that this is who you are, a local digital DJ with only one car and a physique laid a yearning for a new purpose, as if there was something out there I needed to do. I just knew there was a new chapter in my life waiting to be written, like Ross Kemp's sci-fi novel, Robo-Soldier. But what would it be? I could never quite pin it down. It was like trying to recall the dream we had last night. The more you run towards it, the further away it seems to get. Think our Australia's finest export, apart from beef, Olivia Newton-John. Although someone told me recently she's from Greece. Never knew that. She doesn't look Greek. Maybe she shaves her arms. This is Xanadu. It was April 2011 and I was at work again. I pulled down the fader and took off my cans, footnote, what twits/twats called headphones. I wouldn't usually dip into the few letters we got. What had once been a large woven plastic mail sack was now simply a big pencil case. But that day's edition of Consumer Champion had been pulled at the last minute because the complaint was from a woman who got locked in a tanning booth that wouldn't switch off, and the owner of the salon happens to be a friend. Reaching into the mailbag, I felt something smooth, no, followed by no, please. I fumbled around and inside the padded envelope I found a note. It had no name on it, merely the words, "Fall in, troop, fall in, at ease." My mouth went dry. I managed to bleat, "Simon, take over." I grabbed my coat and walked out of the studio. I bustled through the office, heading for the guess he ain't getting told then. I was gone. The people in the corporate side of the business could be tedious busybodies sometimes, but they just worked in a different culture. Disc jockeys and sidekicks should be given more license to do as we please. We have creative sensibilities that need to be cosseted. So, for example, the office guys had to stay until 5 p.m. We could knock off whenever. They weren't allowed to heat up smelly food in the... But I wasn't thinking about office dynamics. I was thinking about what the arrival of the Golden Woggle meant. It meant Peter Flint was in trouble. In 1988, I presented a bi-monthly show called Scout About on Radio Norwich. Scout About was the tip-top, non-stop, hot-to-trot, one-stop shop for British Cubs, Scouts, Venture Scouts, and to a lesser extent, Girl. I was brought in alongside regular presenter Peter Flint, and for a time we were a double act that fizzed like a car battery in a puddle. We co-presented for no more than 6 months, but in that time a bond was formed that nothing could ever break. Our brotherhood cemented one day when we were given a pair of golden woggles by the chief scout. A woggle, for the uninitiated, is a fastener for the neckerchief often made from plast, a truly humbling honour. Owners of a golden woggle become part of an elite group, one that pledges to always be there for others, to be a beacon in times of darkness, a trusted ally in times of strife, and it also means you must never tell on one another. Which isn't for any nefarious reason, although, now I come to say it, it does sound a bit weird. Peter reminded me of a young Chris Evans or a straight Kenny Everett, a brash, confident force of nature with bags of talent. Peter could have been anything he wanted to be. He was the enfant terrible of regional broadcasting. He would tease an arcala or hoik up a quick rope swing, also known as a Tarsi rope, without even asking who owned the tree or whether the branch was within nightclubs, and sometimes hosted barbecues down at the marina on a boat he sometimes borrowed from his wife's brother. He was keen to take Scout About to TV and wowed the BBC Children's Department with his sheer vivacity. However, Kids TV's Supremo, Biddy Baxter, did not like him, and the show fell into development hell, later emerging on Children's ITV as Funhouse, and the show had almost no connection to the scouting movement whatsoever. When Peter was removed from Scout About for getting drunk in his garden on the Queen's birthday, I was hugely disappointed in him. Nonetheless, we remained friends. He knew we could never be seen together, and that contact between us had to cease. The Scouts would never have permitted me to consort with a man who got drunk on the Queen's birthday. Identical, we could have just kept hold of the ones we had. We pledged that if either of us were ever in trouble, we should send the Golden Woggle with the Scout About catchphrase, and the other would, they must, spring to their aid at once. Years passed, Peter settled into a succession of lower-key roles on local radio. The wattage of his broadcasting abilities dimmed by the need to throw to the travel news. Radio Ipswich, All Anglia Radio, Calling Canterbury, Peterborough Community Radio, and Paddock FM all benefited from the sheer fucking magnetism of Peter's on-air personality. Sorry for swearing. I'd long since lost touch with him, but from afar, he'd always seemed happy enough. Give him a box of CDs and a £25 book token to give him the form of a golden woggle. I arrived at his home to find a bevy of cars parked outside. Not wanting to park down the street and walk back, I parked in front of his driveway, having cannily clocked that the car parked in it hadn't been driven for a while. You can tell from the brown leaves that have collected on the front wipers. I do that a lot when I don't want to park down the street and walk back, and I made my way inside. In a downstairs bedroom, I saw the very thing I had dreaded. Peter was in bed, eyes closed, surrounded by family. His loyal wife Kathleen sat beside him, a more buxom presence than the former model who went round pubs in Norwich with a holster full of cigarettes for sale, but still lovely looking. Peter. What? Then, Alan. I looked down. Bravely, Peter had opened his eyes. He reached for my hand and I allowed him to clasp it, subtly nudging Kathleen aside with my hip / the side of my bum, until I was sitting on the bedside chair instead of her. Hello, old friend, gasped Peter. Fall in, true. Incredible moment of stunning emotion, which might not be coming across here. But take my word, it was quite something. Two former presenters of regional scout-based magazine show Scout About reciting the catchphrase after many years of not doing that. Quite something. Long time no see, old friend, I said. Then I regretted bringing it up. You asked for my help, I said, eager to move on. There's only one way you can help, he said. Name it. He pulled my ear close to his lips. Make the most of what you have, he said. Don't do what I did. Don't settle for second best. I beg you, Alan. Do Everett's light and water, but most of all, guts. I'm paraphrasing slightly. I did want to record what he was saying on my iPhone, but the somber mood in the room told me that would have been frowned upon. He definitely said the thing about flowers needing guts, because I remember thinking that was quite odd. What? You mean television, Alan? It's hurt, actually. Promise me you'll do everything you can to get back on TV. He started coughing. All right, love. That's enough, said Kathleen. He closed his eyes. Silence. Then a male voice at the back. Does somebody drive a Vectra? They've blocked me in the bloody drive. I left the house. Pete better after that. Retrained as a financial advisor and apparently made a shitload of money in 2022. But still, a promise was a promise. In that moment, I decided I was going to get myself back on BBC television within 12 months. While I ended up taking slightly longer, it was more like 8 years, I would one day achieve that feat. And yes, a fig leaf, behind which resides the unsightly cock and balls of my own ambition. What I will say is that attitude is exactly why Brexit isn't going very well. Chapter 3. Seeing the Light. July 2021. Last time he drove me up to the retail park and bought me a Whopper. Ended up telling me about his divorce with the windscreen wipers on. In the weeks after my departure from the BBC, my assistant has been trying to bulk out my schedule. This is a tough time for me. I'm a man who enjoys structure. I like to be busy or appear busy. People around me know this. By which I mean there should be 1 or 2 activities in the morning, a scheduled lunch, then something in the afternoon. Evenings are either social or work events. Or she's meant to leave out a ready meal and write in the diary, meal ready, just because I don't like seeing the phrase ready meal written down in my diary. If no lunch is planned, my assistant will do a ring around and see if there are any gala lunches or charity book. Joked to my friend that my diary contains so much white, it looked like a blizzard. He said, it's good you can laugh about it. I said, Kira, that's the hallmark of my career. If you joke about something, it stops it being a threat. Footnote. But the truth is, I hate making deprecating jokes about myself. I tried it for a while when I entered the pub for a weekly quiz, making quips such as, here he is, the bad smell, or odd what is, my diary is empty, and neither I nor my assistant have much clue how to fill it. Obviously, dog walking is off the menu, God only see. I can't even attend my usual rackets club because a complaint I've made is under investigation and I've been asked not to attend until that has been completed, which I respect. Footnote, long story short, a female in her sister's car. It was clear to me and all the men I told that her disability had been a cunning smokescreen, and so that she, a woman, could enter a world of freshly showered men and businessmen and have a good old butcher's, as she claimed. We bravely spoke up as early proponents of a fledgling movement that went by the hashtag #HeToo, and Christine was suspended. Later in my life, I've been genuinely unemployed. On the other occasion, the BBC let me go in 1994 after I discharged a firearm in the studio and killed a man. I still enjoyed a rich seam of corporate work, even doing a tongue-in-cheek photo shoot to promote a local paintball range, which, to use the vernacular, went down like a shit sandwich with the dead man's grieving relatives. Fair enough. I shouldn't have done that. As I say, it was universally disliked. But right now, in 2021, commercial work is sparser. Every now and then, I'll don some gardening trousers for a promo shoot, or host a Q&A where members of the public can fire questions at the CEO of a flexible office provider, or present a one-on-one with a crypto specialist where I'll say what engagements are far and few between. I move listlessly about my home, stopping periodically to drape myself over one of my 3 sofas. But even the leather one I had imported from Pakistan feels scratchy and lumpy. I'm at a loose end and I don't like it. I ask Alexa how she is in the hope that our programmers at Anderson HQ are prepared and amusing. It's preset to my old station, Norfolk Digital. 3 days a week, my former colleague Simon Denton still sidekicks on the show despite also working on this time for now. Still, I enjoy hearing his wisecracks on the radio. The guy's just a talent, something you can't say about his on-air partner and the lead DJ of my erstwhile mid-morning slot, Chase McFadden. You're listening to Mid-Morning Matters on Norfolk Digital. No shit, Chase. It's Monday the 7th of June, which means it's, drumroll please, Sir Tom Jones' birthday in a glittering career. Sir Tom scored 36 UK hits and 19 in the United States, an incredible 55 hit singles. So today, Simon, what are we asking? A jingle booms. Today's Big Q, and there's Simon, what else called Tom? Tom Petty or Tom Waits, maybe. Love it, love it, love it. So, line one, who's there? Alan in Norwich. I hear Chase's tone change as soon as he recognises my voice. But I'm a listener, and I've every right to call him if I want to. Alan Partridge, gushes Chase. Once of this parish, always a treat. What's your favourite? How are you, Simon? All going well on this term? I didn't bother. Beach where we renovate a lighthouse and get Princess Anne to open it. She was telling Jenny she's patron of the Lighthouse Board, so which lighthouse? Abbott's Cliff in Kent. I pull up. Whatever. Face. But you can't see it on the radio. You should have come in slightly quicker after the today's Big Q jingle, I say. Quite a bit of air in there. Thanks, Alan. And sure, make 55 hit singles. They double up. It was probably 36 UK hits, of which 19 were also hits in America. Rather than 36 hits here, then another 19 different songs that were hits in America. Just reading what it says, buddy. Got a favourite Tom Jones song? No? Okay then. Alright, bye. Bye, Alan, says something my Filipino housekeeper Rosa to ball up my socks, just for something, anything to do. Later I hold one end of the bedsheet and she the other, meeting in the middle so that she can fold the sheet, like a sedate version of a bonus dance. If my friends could see me now, I think, helping a woman do the very work I'm paying her to do, why, they'd pee themselves laughing, and they'd be right to being sniffly that presumably Madam will be getting her full wage for doing half the work. I know Rosa is humouring me for fear of having her visa revoked or whatever it is she keeps going on about, but I think she gets something out of it too. I sometimes make suggestions that, applied correctly, would improve the workflow of certain tasks. For example, Rosa hadn't realised that when taking is required and leaving the dirty tableware beside the dishwasher, ready for entry once the clean plates were put away. I tell her it's all about finding small efficiencies, and although she goes and gets the anchovies from the fridge, having mistaken the word efficiencies for fishes, I think she gets it. Throughout all this, the kerfuffle I've let under the BBC has smouldered. I remember as I typed, but Fawkes didn't manage to do that and was pulled to pieces by horses. Still, the same kind of idea. But it just isn't enough. Time dribbles on. Seconds turn to minutes, turn to hours, turn to days, turn to weekends, turn to long weekends, turn to weeks. What I needed was purpose. This couldn't be the end. Work out what I should be doing. But it was like, and I'll say it again because it's a good phrase, and I think you should be allowed to use a good phrase more than once, trying to recall the dream you had last night. The more you run towards it, the further away it seems to get. And then one morning in September, I arise at dawn. I put on good socks, new ones I've been saving. Something is aimless with neither compass nor sandwich. I'd given my all to the BBC, agreeing wholeheartedly with its public service ethos and sharing its hatred of advertising. But now, with nowhere to go, I, Partridge, start walking like a nomad. I have nowhere to be. I have nothing to come home for. I hop on a bus. I'm in a town now. Now it is countryside. Look, there's a business park. Look, there's the sea. The surrounding topography melts between one form and another. It is starting to get dark. And then, there it is. I stop and my eyes go up a bit. Rising from a windy headland, down, is a lighthouse. I feel my back straighten, as if subconsciously aping its posture. Fallen into disuse it may have been, /done, but it is standing there nonetheless. It cares nothing for the vagaries of fashion, for the whims of producers or commissioners, for the eddies and flows of popular taste. It simply remains. It's a blob of regurgitated sandwich. Previously, I'd always found lighthouses a bit flashy. Footnote, gotta try stand-up. And had often dismissed them as little more than big hollow torches. And look at it, the walls are pockmarked and peeling, the windows are stained, cracked, and one is fully broken, perhaps where youths have thrown stones at it. Right now, I'm struck by the sheer resilience of lighthouses. While I'm attacked, buffeted, naysayed, lighthouses stand tall and unbending. Residents, local businesses, councillors, seagulls, holidaymakers, they all come and go, but throughout, the lighthouse remains impassive and permanent. The sniggerers may dismiss much more than that. As I look up at the building, it occurs to me that they are lasting relics of a time when people would look out for their fellow man, a proud monument to the simple act of caring. Today we look to television and radio for guidance. It is broadcasters who shepherd us away from harm, be it the weather forecaster telling us to pop a coat on, the daytime TV show in the days before TV and radio. The lighthouse was our broadcaster, a glowing friend who'd say, you might want to steer clear of those rocks, or there's land in this direction, FYI. Yes, the parallels between broadcasting and lighthousery should now have been made abundantly clear to the less able reader. But what compelled me to come to this place, in the book within the prose itself, to this large lantern, footnote, here it comes, to this significant signal, footnote, oh my God, I'm about to say it, to this, gosh, I don't know, this big beacon, footnote, absolutely superb, I'm so glad I did that. I catch myself. Get a grip, Alan, what is a lighthouse, really? With its conical cylinder, it's time to head home. Storm clouds are coming in. I turn to leave. But what's that on the breeze? My olfactory system detects the smell, the faintest smell, of candy floss. I turn to look at the lighthouse, but my eye is taken by something remarkable. In this light and from this angle, that giant black storm, it is the very image that has been seared into my mind when Seldom died. And then, odder still, a bolt of lightning flashes across the sky, eerily reminiscent of how Seldom would bare his teeth if you smiled at him. Could this be a sign? A sign from Seldom in the afterlife? Is that what has brought me here? The vicar hosing confetti off a footpath and begin to head home. I have dry cleaning to collect, or I'll have nothing to wear for Esther McVeigh's barbecue in a few days. Chapter 4. New Ways of Thinking. October 2011. Getting back on, I said curtly, aware that every other customer and most of the staff were craning their necks to see who it was for. It was October 2011, and I was in a branch of Prontoprint where I'd come to have my latest work printed and leather-bound. The document, a 95-page tome of pure laser-focused strategy, was the product of several weeks of brainstorming, jotting, deleting, rejotting, and blue skying. Private and confidential means classified, I hissed. I'd thank you not to holler it to all and sundry. Do you think the CIA had its dossier on killing bin Laden shouted out for all to hear? If they had it printed in a Prontoprint, yeah. I glared at him. I've really got into glaring recently, finding it an effective way of losing your temper without having to think of bin Laden put down. The bearded Al-Qaeda, the frontman, had been killed while resisting arrest 5 months earlier, and comparing someone's efforts unfavorably to those of the CIA was my go-to slag-off for a further 12 months. $229.90, he grinned. I paid, took the book, discarded the plastic bag it had been slotted into by throwing it onto the floor of the shop, and whooshed away. A step-by-step blueprint to re-establish myself as a presence on British TV screens. I won't go into specifics. I may want to sell the book for money in the future. But put it this way, as a strategic field guide, it was literally bulletproof. Footnote, although not literally. Under the chapters Focus, Mindset, Objectives, Get Real, Action Points, Refocus, No Surrender, with plans A, B, C, D, and E prescribed in forensic detail. Essentially, the strategy involved me getting the word out that I'd be amenable to the kind of shitty presenting work I might previously have scoffed at, including online and youth-orientated. With a raft of credits amassed in short order, I could then start to apply for longer-form corporate presentations. Listen on the digital channels before making the leap to similar gigs on the core terrestrial networks. Then it was a hop-skip-jump to my own shows or anchoring roles on blue ribbon titles in the spheres of current affairs, factual or chat. It would be 1, easy, 2, peasy, 3, lemon, and finally 4, squeezy. I would read passages in bed every night or as much as I could. Chapter 5. I Shall. Avast! Avast! Screams the barrowman. Land 2 points above the beam, starboard side. Land, I say. With the captain nowhere to be seen, you turn to order the coxswain to change course, but he too has abandoned his post. Abe, you are far too close to the shore. 'Tis 1793, and as midshipman of the Amsterdam, a merchant ship under the banner of the Dutch East India Company, you instantly sense danger. You look round, the weather, wind with bits of rain in it, lashing your cheeks like liquid shrapnel. No matter, for yours is a weather-beaten face, a craggy The captain appears, all smooth skin and large, privileged nostrils. Helm down, let her come up, he bellows, but there's panic in his voice. You helm down like that, fair chance you'll scuttle her, you say, removing the pipe from betwixt your teeth. We'll see, shall we? Brays the captain. Happen we will. A second lay spinning from its underside, much as tinned food spills from the burst bottom of a cheap plastic carrier bag. The ship severs into two. The back end or stern of the ship is lost forever in the freezing, inky black waters. And suddenly the front section, or prow, starts its deathly descent into the depths. Its plunge almost reluctant. Like a hand, men leap off the stricken boat, their legs doing a running action in midair, like the Isle of Man logo before they are lost in the waters. You peer down at the rolling seas. Amid the gloom, you can just make out people dotted between floating crates. Human croutons in a massive bowl of cold cargo soup. Barrels of sugar, spices, and rum of Bacardi and blackcurrant, if you're a young woman. A young woman, you think, and you remember that somewhere on board is Eliza, the flame-haired, i.e. ginger, harbour master's daughter you had fallen for back in Exmouth. Yours had been a forbidden love, her waistcoated father adamant that you would never marry a seafarer, and come away she had, hiding in your quarters where you'd spend nights sharing hopes for the future and having sex. Eliza! Eliza! I am here, she trills, and emerges from her cabin. What is it, my love? And you explain what's happening with the crash and whatnot. Will we die? She says to answer. I promised you happiness. Seems I have failed you, you whisper. She touches your face. You have never failed at anything in your life, the beautiful woman says. You're perfect. You tell Eliza to jump. Only when satisfied that all crew have abandoned ship do you even consider doing this. Whoosh! Then silence. You plunge beneath the surface, suddenly at peace as your ears are temporarily jammed by compacted water. Then you emerge, shaking your head, so your long hair releases droplets of water, similar to a Davidoff angle. The yelps and hollers of the panicking men temporarily disorient. You're a strong swimmer, excelling especially in the backstroke and the newly invented butterfly. Ordinarily, you'd be able to cut through the waves and tow Eliza by the chin until you made landfall, where, after a brief rest, you could have sex again, but without being able to see. And then, salvation. For suddenly, cuckoo, a light comes on. 'Tis a light. Land, you say. It's this way. But when you turn, you see the men are frolicking and playing. Now, come on, you'll die. Get out of the fucking water, now. Bloody hell, easy, says a voice. Get out of the water! Get out of the water! Alan, stop, replies the voice. I said stop. Jesus Christ, you're scaring the kids. I'm not in the ice-cold waters of the English Channel, but in the now equally frosty environment of Esther McVeigh's summer barbecue. In the pool, children are whimpering, some quite pathetically. All around me are the staring eyes of women I recognize from the worlds of broadcasting and politics. Footnote, two realms Esther straddles quite elegantly. Women who wouldn't water in the way a sheep would. The absorbency of wool, it can absorb up to 30% of its weight in water, is why you never see knitted swimming trunks, although you can see there are other reasons too. I press pause on my shipwreck daydream, parking it for later rather than ditching it completely, because I still want to get to the swimming to shore and having sex bit. I take stock of it. My eyes are wild, my breathing shallow and heavy, if that's possible. Dermot O'Leary approaches warily and slowly takes something from me. I realise now that I've been holding a lamp, one of those outdoor uplighters that have been trained on a tree. Why do people like trees? And beaming it towards the pool, acting for all the world like a deranged human lighthouse. That's the McFay's summer barbecue. I straighten my hair. It's to the right, by the way. The nap of the hair sits flatter in that direction. And mutter some apologies. I should go, I say. Normally when I say I should go, such as after singing the song from The Greatest Showman when a woman is inviting me back for coffee, or accidentally letting off in a judo hold, I expect as, you should go. Yeah, I did just say that, Esther. I snap. Everywhere I look over the next few days, whether cooking dinner, looking at pictures of totem poles, or having a quiet night in with a cherished friend, I see the lighthouse. It's there in the shape of a peppermill, a wine bottle, a stick of celery, a totem pole. I even find myself forming a lighthouse from compacted bits of mashed potato, but I throw it away when it starts to go brown. It's as if the lighthouse is trying to force itself into my consciousness. But why? It is speaking to me. Why? Because lighthouses are important. And just because people have gone off them and moved on to younger, restoring them to former glory. One of my favourite pieces of writing is this brief essay on lighthouses. It's reproduced here with the kind permission of its author, footnote me, and publisher, footnote me. They say we don't need lighthouses. They say we have global positioning systems now. We have depth sounders, X-band radar, and electronic charting. Easy peasy, they say. Nothing can go wrong, they say. But what if it does? What if a cyber hack causes the world's entire GPS system to fail? What then? What if the Russians invent a nautical radar jam? What if the charting systems crash? What if someone left the depth sounders on the quayside and they're sitting there now, useless? Ships would be literally all at sea. In the pitch black, you'd have oil tankers ploughing towards Portsmouth, ready to shed their gloopy load all over the harbour. And look there, a passenger ferry about to crash into Hastings, spilling immigrants across the beach. Something the residents of Hastings, still reeling from the unwelcome arrival of the Normans, famously cannot stand. Yacht into Folkestone, vomiting its payload of Teslas all over Britain's already congested roads. A cruise liner full of pensioners somehow drifts into the Solent, crushing yachts and ruining Cowsweek for the braying, coked-up idiots who like to attend. Quickly, someone would say, let's turn on the lighthouses so people can see where the bloody hell they are. Just one problematic seaside cafe that sells £15 fish and chips. Or they've been turned into Airbnbs and there's a bathtub where the giant light bulb should be. We thought we knew it all, and now we're paying the price for our own stupid arrogance. An unlikely turn of events? Perhaps. But do you want to take the risk? Anyway, aside from their admittedly benefits either, if you still respect them, would you let Granny or Grandad fall into the sea or be destroyed by diggers? Of course not. So it seems insane that we don't afford the same privilege to coastal buildings. When I look at a lighthouse, I see a certain majesty, a proud defiance, a structure of solemn fortitude that says, let the rain lash us, I shall still remain standing, ready to shine my light. You may be dazzled by the new. The vagaries of fashion may draw your eye elsewhere to one of those glass and steel office blocks that for some reason looks like it's leaning because architects think that straight lines are naff. Or to a high-rise apartment complex because apparently the phrase block of flats is considered distant from other structures. Noble. Selfless. Its walls may not house a start-up company that makes apps, or an indoor skate park, or a fleet of Mercedes-Benzes, But what does it offer? It helps people. It offers guidance in times of need. Yes, these misunderstood cylinders think only of others. And there are always going to be cynics. People say, are you really talking about lighthouses, or are you talking about yourself because you're worried you're past it? To which I say, I'm on about the first one. I need to think. Something wants me to dwell on all this. Could it be that this is what Seldom wants me to do with my life? Like Field of Dreams, but instead of Kevin Costner building a baseball stand, important monument because a dead dog told me to. Not actually any more ludicrous than the Costner one. Nitpickers, e.g. my editor, will doubt the veracity of this vision, or complain that it's broadly the same construct I used to motivate the revival of my TV career, but I'm taking the idea of honouring the wishes of a dying friend and retooling it with a dog, and in adjacent chapters as well. The morning after Esther's barbecue, still sheepish at having been asked to leave, I slink back to collect my coat. I'm feeling a little awkward, but I have to say Esther could not be nicer. She'll bend over backwards for anyone, as long as they're not on benefits and speak English as their first language. She ushers me into the kitchen where, just my luck, several of the previous day's guests who'd stayed at Barlow, Liz Kershaw, James Martin, Theo Prophetus, and Carol Malone plus partners, a who's who of people you'd expect to find eating a five at Esther McVeigh's house. As they cram the greased food into their mouths, they're having an animated debate about coloured wheelie bins. We used to have one metal dustbin for everything, and everyone was a damn sight happier. Oh, I can't remember all the different ones, but I do know it's completely bloody stupid, attempts Martin, who is less good at this than the others. I blame recycling, chortles Barlow. Everyone agrees that recycling is annoying, while Castle, with one eye on his talk radio show, frantically scribbles notes and mutters, "This is gold, this is gold." If you finish with something, get rid. Absolutely, they all agree. Hanging's different. No, they're talking more about things you don't use anymore. I'm enjoying the conversation immensely. If I'd had plans to mount a TV comeback, Esther's Breakfast Bar, or Home Truths with Esther, would be at the top of my list. But since I don't, I just join in. Mind you, I saw a broken old lighthouse yesterday, I smile. You wouldn't want to partition it into a 4-bed and turn it into a luxury holiday rental. A lighthouse will be conservation this, English heritage that, and grade 2 listed blah blah blah, and everyone having to tiptoe around the place just because it's old. This is what I'd do to the lighthouse, and on that she uses the back of a fork to mash a potato waffle into what is left of her beans. I know, like pink cauldrons of laughter and egg and sausage. Well, some people like old maritime buildings, I say. The laughter stops. Some people don't agree with any of you, actually. Some people think we should preserve our national treasures. Some people have a bit of respect. Silence. The lump is still there in my throat, but I recognize it now as fury at the state of the lighthouse, our maritime heritage. You rebuild it then, Mrs. Barlow. I just might, Gary, and I nod at them in turn. Andrew, Liz, Theo, James, Carol. It's Carol with an E. Oh, I know it's with an E, I shout. They're pronounced the same, Carol. Oh, and the glasses around your neck aren't fooling anyone. You're thick and you know it. You're just an annoying woman who struggles to be funny. Best wishes, Alan Partridge. And I am away, heading for the door. Esther's Breakfast Bar. I conclude in that moment that any lingering interest I've had in a television career is well and truly gone. I am going to buy and restore an English lighthouse, and I will call it Seldom. January 2012. By the start of 2012, my TV renaissance had borne as much fruit as my assistant eats. None. With every setback, I would slink back to the restorative bosom of North Norfolk Digital, in the same way a Joey would slink back to the inside of its mother's pouch. One morning I asked my old woman, did they have an unusual hobby? Brackets, e.g. were they gay? The plan? To do my radio show, then spend the afternoon hammering the phones, speaking to the commissioners, and offering my services. But by the time I got to my car, my assistant had emailed through a list of contact details, a worryingly quick turnaround that suggested that she had had a list to hand already. Password, footnote, of course it was Jesus is coming. A quick scan of her emails confirmed my worst fears. She had been using her initiative, something her contract expressly forbids, to offer my services to every TV channel she could think of, and a few she couldn't. The missives were peppered with clumsy attempts at formal phrases. Much worse were her attempts to market me. According to her letters, I was presentable, neat, punctual, and good. I would give most things a go, if medically allowed. And she even told Channel 4 that I could do a young person's accent and was prepared to use any of the following swear words: shit, penis, twit, ass, arse, bloody, and the N-word, where she'd culled entire passages from an old online dating profile I'd written, so that mixed in with my professional skills were declarations that I enjoyed the company of clean women, preferred real chests only, please, and was happy to pay for dinner on dates 1, 3, 5, and 7. While accurate, the letters, when read together by a prospective employer, were nonsense. A list of shit-sounding jingles from Station Ident 1 to Station Ident Short to Funky Jingle V2 to News Slam Intro to News Slam Outro to Weather Sponsor with VO to Weather Sponsor Original to Sexy Jingle Do Not Play Before 9 p.m. I decided to do something. There and then, I typed out a text message to accept an invitation to do a piece of sting backward step. But maybe it was the kickstart I needed. Chapter 7. My transition begins. Brackets, not gender. November 2021. I'm glaring at a man. He's standing in my bedroom, staring me down without a shred of contrition, continues to hold my gaze. I take half a step closer. I said, "Have you got a fucking problem?" The man raises his eyebrows as if amused, mocking me almost. This guy. "Because if you do," I say, "let's step outside, son. Have a little chat there. Then maybe I'll give your face a problem, eh? How about that?" The man shows no inclination to step outside. "You know what you are? Chicken shit. You heard, so get your things and get out." Then with my arms out slightly to make myself look wider, I stand there, cock of the walk. God, that felt good. That little exercise, a scripted tough guy conversation between me and my own reflection, was taught to me by Ross Kemp, and I've never thought he's tough and to pump himself up in the pecs. Me, I only tend to do it when I need to steel myself for an important occasion or a big decision. And boy, am I facing a big decision now. I'm about to embark on a potentially life-altering change of circumstances, bigger even than going vegetarian for a week back in 2019. It will mean leaving behind the cashmere comfort blanket, and while my assistant is yet to be convinced, that's very much her problem, and not mine. Footnote, her concern was that I had a tendency to become unhealthily obsessed by things at times of crisis in my life. For example, the following relationship, which I'm only prepared to discuss here in a footnote. For several weeks, in late 2013, I had been romantically entangled with a recently retired female hunter. Between the sheets, feedback was frequent and unambiguous. "Do it faster. Bounce me slower. You're making that noise again, Alan." She didn't muck about when it came to physicality either. The early exchanges of lovemaking typically characterized by an abundance of shoving and grabbing. In general, she would shove and I would grab, though mainly to stop myself falling off the bed. Sexy talks would make a vicar blush, as to make him just sit there not saying anything for quite a long time before standing up and saying he has to go now. The key was not to take it personally. If there were occasions when I felt myself becoming upset, I'd simply say I needed the loo, and, if permission was granted, a few minutes alone, reciting positive affirmations would generally right me before I'd request. Fortunately for me, however, this has never been an issue. For whatever reason, I am one of those men who is relatively quick to stiffen. With completion achieved, hers, not mine, I tended not to. All mention of me being a worthless subhuman piece of shit who couldn't even keep his family together or whatever would instantly cease as she picked up the phone and went back to looking at judo news. Ultimately, though, I used to serve in the SAS. They were just a better fit. Do I need pumping up? You better believe it. And getting shirty with my own reflection just works. As Ross says, if you want to be a big boy, you've got to act the big boy. And now I feel ready. Ready to raise the funds needed to purchase a ruin. Ready to make the necessary arrangements to move. I grab my car keys, gate, fob, phone, wallet, jacket, belt and cap. And then off I go to meet a real estate agent. By which I mean an agent of real estate rather than an estate agent who's real. Important to make that clear. can you stop talking about Fraggle Rock now, please? I'm in the Greasy Spoon Cafe on Sheringham High Street, on my second meal dingouts. Opposite sits Edward, an estate agent with a knot in his tie so egregiously fat, I want to reach over and yank it to an acceptable size before he can stop me. But I don't. On the table before me, the particulars of 6 lighthouses are fanned out. Somerset, Dorset, Yorkshire, Sussex, Cornwall and Scotland. Although I haven't really looked at that one because I'm on ease on it because my assistant distracted me while I was putting the spoon to my mouth. The blurb for Cornwall boasts of its many appearances on the small screen in a much-loved children's show, prompting Edward to launch into a freewheeling and seemingly pointless description of the show Fraggle Rock, which is now entering its 10th minute, even though my assistant and I have made clear we've never heard of it. Edward stops talking about found, say, Abbott's Cliff. The agent looks surprised. Oh, well, there is one right there, yes, but it's currently under offer. Beat the offer, I say, dabbing at my mouth with a paper napkin before standing up. I shove the chair back with my legs, forgetting it bolted to the floor, meaning the edge of the seat just digs into the back of my knees. Ow! The giant eye has swiveled this way and that to calmly guide vessels westward towards the port of Folkestone. And though derelict, it has a grace and nobility well beyond the reach of any of the new breed of younger, more fashionable lighthouses that probably have their own social media accounts. Well, I just fall in love with the place. Yet my assistant today. Only thing is, Alan, told you, I'm just not sure it's the right thing to do. That's exactly what you said about getting a microwave, I shoot back. Now look at you. You can ping and ding with the best of them. It's just, if you're trying to get one over on someone, let bitterness take hold, it will never let go. It's like Japanese, not doing something with meaning, something that takes a rundown ruin and turns it into something special. Look at me, I've never been happier. I'm fizzing around the place like a soluble painkiller. I'm like Solpadeine. You know all about Solpadeine, don't you? She smiles and does a little nod. She likes it when she can join in with my similes. Later that day, we'll need to raise, using a calculator that's on the last dregs of its battery. The readout is incredibly faint and intermittent, but eventually a number swims into view like a Victorian ghost appearing at a foggy window before disappearing. I have already begun divesting myself of some of my assets. First to be recalled was the startup loan of 35k I'd given to 2 models from Brighton who wanted to start a green. I only invested in it in the first place because I was trying to impress a group of friends who earn more money than I do. My portfolio of shares was the next to be sold off. Shell, gone. BP, gone. Nestle, gone. HSBC, gone. Amazon, gone. Uber, gone. Bet365, gone. Shoezone, retained. Footnote, had no choice, joint investment, hesitant on account of needing to do a photo shoot in just my swimming trunks. But needs must, and by adding a clause to the contract insisting they digitally deflate my stomach, lower back and chin, and inflate my calves, quads, pecs, hands and lips, I felt comfortable I'd emerge with much of my dignity intact. With some of my assets now liquid, and my pecs and tummy successfully monetized, I put it in the medium to high tens of thousands. Am I surprised or upset? No, it's a figure I could still comfortably raise on my own. I'm very well off and one of the shrewdest investors I know. I have a collection of vintage mobile phones in a shoebox that must be worth a few grand. And I estimate I own at least £5,000 worth of good quality bric-a-brac. 11 all full of shit. However, something is nagging at me. If I'm to pull this project off, I'll feel pretty damn proud of myself. But then I think, isn't that quite selfish? To keep all of that pride to myself? What if there was a way of letting other people feel proud as well? If I was to say, ask the public to donate money as part of a crowdfunding, I could do, even though, as I say, I don't need to do it because I have plenty of dosh of my own. I jot down a short blurb explaining that the lighthouse renovation will be funded by the community, built for the community, and feel like it belongs to the community. The feel like is an important caveat because, of course, legally, it will be owned entirely by me, a point I underlined at the bottom. And add a few hundred words culled from Google on her stunning legacy. Not that she has anything to do with this lighthouse. Hers is in Scotland, nor is she any more heroic than any other lighthouse keeper, brought, she only saved 9 lives, whereas the average for male lighthouse keepers is likely to be in double figures. I don't know, I just feel that in the current climate, her inherent womanness will help broaden the reach. Designed by me with the help of a millennial employee, Partridge keeps taking the mouse and doing it for me rather than just explaining how to do it and letting me learn for myself. The merchandise features a picture of yours truly in the foreground, with the lighthouse behind. And by choosing a photo where I am extending my hand, I've created the illusion that I'm holding the lighthouse in my palm. A visual effect taught to me by a holidaying... It isn't just the money. No, I enjoy the thought of being a piece of something bigger, part of a wider team of history buffs and kindly philanthropists, leading the way while 1,000 backseat drivers chip in with their 2 pence at every opportunity. Yeah, cannot wait. By the end of 2021, when the crowdfunding deadline arrives, I've raised a healthy amount for guys in Malaysia, plus the fee for the Partridge professional design service that I'd mistaken for Dwayne just showing me how to use the computer, came to £6,000. A little, but once I've topped up the pot with a small bridging loan signed off by the team at Bradford and Bingley, I have the money I need. Footnote. I've always thought Bradford and Bingley sound like the names of 2 talking dogs in a ship that would fail to resonate with the kids of today. A safer bet to call Disney would be to make Bradford a boy dog that used to be a girl dog, and Bingley a girl dog that used to be a boy dog, tapping into the prevailing wokeness of modern culture, but handling the subject with sensitivity and care will make a surefire success of any such tranny dog franchise. But what do I know? 6 days later, direction of my assistant, chin up slightly, very nice, bit more teeth, not that much teeth, tuck in the tummy, perfect. I bring down the pen and sign, the lighthouse is mine. I am now, quite simply, and it's not a name I will use again because it sounds quite childish, the Big Beacon Boy. As excited as I am about my new life by the sea, cutting the umbilical cord that tethers me will miss Norfolk, so Norfolk will miss me too. Not to toot my own bugle, footnote. Until recently, I'd have started this sentence with not to blow my own trumpet, but I've since been told the phrase is a euphemism for bending double and self-relating. But I've been one of the biggest dogs in the county for the best part of 30 years, and when someone like that is no longer there, it leaves a hole. I'll shake hands with a corner shop owner. I'll chat to female beggars, offer feedback to buskers, and be the very visible face of campaigns against any council plans, e.g. the pedestrianisation of Norwich city centre, that are a clear backward step for the community. I don't always have time for shelf stackers, but a nod in their direction as I grab a fresh pack of all bran, you better believe it. However, exiting the we begin to map things out. I'm not exactly awash with cash now, so she suggests, wrongly, that I should put the Oast House on Airbnb. Absolutely no way, is my reply. No way will I ever do that. Complete strangers milling about in my house. Yes, but you'll be living in Kent, and the income will ain't happening. Some inner city family I've never met, clattering round my house, screaming the good grace to put down a dog towel. Absolutely not. Not now, not ever. With that subject dealt with, it's on to more workaday matters. First to be tackled is my membership of the David Lloyd Health and Rackets Club. Financially, it would make sense to cancel this membership, but socially, no way. You see, whereas London has the Carlton and the Groucho, Norwich has the David Lloyd and Norfolk Lake. Quite simply, the David Lloyd is where things get done, exchanging business cards in the steam room, floating a proposal as you and senior businessmen talc each other down by the lockers, looking into the whites of a fellow exec's eyes as you hammer out a deal in the showers. Calling up my manager, Richard Juice, I make a bold pitch. Footnote. As a child, Richard is my membership on hold while I'm out of the county to be reactivated upon my return. Juice gives this short shrift. If you don't want the membership, there are plenty who will. I counter. Okay then, will he allow me to put my membership on hold if I continue to pay my monthly membership fee? We have a deal. The art of negotiation is finding a point between the two opposing positions where both parties can be happy. As I rival his team as familiar faces of the Boxley Wheat Chief, Tony Blanche, Clive Lambeth, Phil Tin and I have been pub quizzing under the name Cromwell's Bitches since 2007, and we've been through a lot. The final in '09 when we narrowly edged out the periodic table dancers to walk away with the coveted copper tankard. The final in 10 when they narrowly won it back again. Bill's wife's cancer, the semis, and so saying Tatar hurts. As for my hair and beauty team, well, I reached an agreement with the Thai lady who burns off my nasal hair that she will make the trip to Kent every 2 months, while my hairdressers, I have 3 on rotation in order to foster a healthy sense of competition, will be contacted if I'm unable to find a suitable arrangement near the lighthouse. Footnote, their names are Giovanni, Gianni, and Lou, my contacts, and I must have started it a dozen times. How to get the tone right when there are so many people to appeal to. Important people like friends and celebrities, and others like tradesmen and the pediatrician I know. In the end, I just force myself to begin and say that if I stop before the email is finished, I won't be allowed a treat after my tea. It works better than I could ever have imagined. Did I know I remain immensely proud? The email is reproduced below. Pals, alas, it's time for me to flee. Riding south to Kent and sea. Tears are forming in my ducts. Round fat droplets, fit for ducks. I pray that you keep safe and well. Do not forget my face, my smell. Go raise a glass, sup by the gallon. Ever your letter of each line spells Partridge. My assistant feels I should delete the explanation, as if pointing out the acronym somehow makes it feel less good. I disagree, arguing successfully that the small chance someone might not notice what I've done is simply a risk too far, since without the acronym, the poem could be seen as potentially shit. And then the day comes, 7th of February, 2020, before the school run. I was determined to spend the day in good spirits, but I knew this would be impossible. If I had to contend with any lollipop ladies, their total inability to understand that a driver stopping for them is a convention and not the law never fails to wind me up. The right-of-way remains at all times with the vehicle on the carriageway. Stopping is at the driver's discretion, and if they judge that not stopping is... Fortunately for me, I am bang on schedule, and with both car and snacks packed, I close my front door and head to my vehicle. I flick my head round to take one last look at the oast house, my chin resting on my shoulder in a way that's accidentally coquettish, but does prove I would have been quite sexy if I'd been born a lady. That thought is disturbed by the ringing noise the telephone makes when it rings. I jog back inside former this time producer Howard Newman. Hello, Howard. You bought our fucking lighthouse. Oh dear, Howard seems angry, and as you can imagine, this makes me very, very sad. Sorry, your lighthouse? It was going to be a running feature of the show for the next year. A historic renovation in honor of the Princess Royal. Community involvement. Jenny doing the whole challenge and it. What, and you think... Let me get this straight because I'm really confused now. You think I've gazumped you and bought the lighthouse out of spite? Oh, Howard, that's hurtful. You're a child. Thank you. I use oil of Olay to keep my skin plump. Will there be anything else, Howard? You'll regret this. Click. He's hung up. To this day, I feel awful about all this. A dreadful misunderstanding, CEO and half a Mars bar. I think, that's a bloody eagle. It was 40 minutes later and I was on the A140, noticing something in the corner of my eye. Not literally the corner of my eye, that was just a benign growth that had appeared the previous Christmas after I tried to rinse some grit from my eye using vinegar. But somewhere in my peripheral vision, a dark splodge against the slate grey Norfolk sky. But not a basic bird. Neither a basic boring bird like a sparrow or a basic rudely named bird like a tit or thrush. No, this appeared to be nothing short of an eagle. I'd just passed the village of Skull, the last conurbation before exiting Norfolk, and was suddenly overwhelmed by a strong sense that, far from just flying around looking for something to do, this majestic feathered creature had been below my window. Farewell, dear friend. Prithee well. I considered what to say next. Quite like the phrase winged guardian, but couldn't think of how to put it in a sentence. Also, I don't like the Guardian. I closed the window again. Footnote. When I later relayed this story to an ornithologist friend of mine, to the extent that you can never really be friends with an ornithologist, he said that it wouldn't have been an eagle that was just seen from my car window and wasn't even that arsed. Yet the message was not lost on me. Just as birds emigrate to think eagles go to Spain, so I was emigrating to Kent. Chapter 8. Going Places. Brackets of my life. The fee wasn't great, but I needed to swing by anyway to collect my body warmer and underpants from the lost property box. I wouldn't say I was the world's biggest bad thing to an aficionado, but by the time we got to the semi-finals, I'd largely mastered the terminology. And Clive Kennedy absolutely wallops the cockle shot. It was then that I spotted none other than Norwich carpet kingpin Brendan O'Connor domestic, carpet or laminate. These guys had it covered, literally. If it was inside and you could walk on it, it was probably carpet chief. Footnote. In those days, Carpet Chief was riding high, although more recently things have been tougher. Designed in the 1980s, their logo featured the friendly face of a Native American chief saying, "How can we help you?" Quite clever, really. But these days, ranging tied to the most, buffeted they eventually were. And the logo, featuring the affectionately named Big Chief Carpet Man, was quietly retired. Today he's been replaced by a talking rug. But it's just not as good. But what was he doing here? He wasn't taking part. The last thing you'd describe Coyle as was an athlete. Big gut, large arse, and fingers like the sausage rolls that made up the Bulkertons carpet the sports hall were true. And would it have been such a mad idea? Certainly it would have put a stop to the high-pitched noises made by training shoes jamming against the rubber floor, the dreaded sports hall squeak. Carpet would also cushion the falls that were an almost daily occurrence at a facility whose patrons were overwhelmingly geriatric. The manager once told me they had 9 making wear rubber gloves to do the washing up, even though he wants to do it without. As it turned out, sports hall carpetisation was never to come to pass. The wobbly pensioners would have to take their chances. No, Brendan was there because Carpet Chief was the tournament's platinum sponsor, providing the first prize of 25 square metres of carpet, laminate or vinyl to the winner in the men's competition and 20 square metres. Not that I was particularly enthused by the sport unfolding before me. By now there was an unmistakable half-arsedness to my delivery, even the bits that required oomph. Shot of the morning, sponsored by Carpet Chief, goes to Helga Bellamy for what's described here as a jumping backhand with shout. Wish I'd seen that. You can imagine the skirt bellowing on the way down like a German pub. I caught sight of myself with a reflection offered by a vending machine. A man in an Umbro tracksuit carrying a hefty microphone and speaker, like a man on day release setting up the karaoke in the corner of a pub for a friend. I sighed, deep and long and hard. Remember, I'd once presented live coverage of the Tour de France, of World Cup football contests, of Saturday of sports broadcasting, and while my love or tolerance of sport has waned to the point of disintegration over the years, the fact remains I used to be an extremely successful sports broadcaster. I used to be somebody. I turned away from the court, where a man was on his 5th or 6th attempt at getting his serve over the net, and I began quite simply to natter. Good that he has been open since 1997, barring a week in 2010 when it had to be shut down after a glass eye was found bobbing about in a ladies' toilet. This is the sports hall, and the panels of composite roofing you can see above were actually taken from a decommissioned poultry factory owned by the late Bernard Matthews. If you look long enough, you'll sometimes make out a feather I fizzled out. This was hopeless. I caught sight of myself in the vending machine again, then accidentally said out loud, "What the fuck am I doing?" It echoed around the sports hall like a whip crack. I set down the speaker and microphone and decided that was enough. I sauntered over to the vending machine, shoved in a quid and punched option 04, chick-filled cup. I realized Brendan O'Coyle was standing next to me. I nodded at the carpet kingpin mirthlessly. "Brendan? Alan? Pleased to meet you." "Ditto." It was a crisp opening, something I'd imagine the out-of-shape businessman enjoyed, although in his case it'd be a walker's grab bag. As I pushed back the vending machine's coin concealment flap to retrieve my 80 description of the leisure centre, couldn't help but wonder if I could bring something so humdrum to life. Maybe I could do the same on a much bigger canvas. I could hardly believe my good fortune. He and a group of local business bigwigs, footnote, literally it turned out in the case of 3 of them who'd lost the run of their BMIs and wore hairpieces, had recently got together to launch a project called Horizon North to increase revenues for their businesses. The central plank of the campaign was to be a documentary called Welcoming, Placid, Lively, about the best bits of the region, which was to air on local digital channel Mustard TV, formerly That's Norfolk. And now he wanted me to narrate it. They'd sent a videographer to grab a few shots. The market, the high street, the town hall, some countryside, some leisure facilities. But I would not get script sign-off. Could we talk production budget? We could not talk production budget. Was there scope to reimagine the format? There was not scope to reimagine the format. I could sense he was wary of these questions, clearly concerned that I would deviate from the central mission of the project to get people to move to and spend money in the Norwich area. I told him he had no worries there. As far as I was concerned, there was no need for micromanaging. That seemed to mollify him, so much so that he felt able to loosen the creative straitjacket. I could write my own script, I'd have significant creative input. I could appear on screen in a limited capacity, and if extra budget was needed, we could talk about that. He looked at me, then asked, "What do you say?" And action! And to provide a bit of impetus to the description of the filming process. Filming took place over 2 weeks in April 2012. I had piles for the entire fortnight, but I didn't tell anyone, and it didn't affect the schedule. The team got on great, we really did. Of course, looking back now through the lens of the various hashtags we must obey, it seems appalling how little diversity there was. With the exception of, I'm a loud and proud supporter of encouraging people of all genders, backgrounds, and handicaps into the industry. They may not look like you, they may not sound like you, they may not walk like you, but surely having to put in a little bit of extra effort is a small price to pay for a TV industry rich in different voices and experiences and walking styles. But yeah, as I say, we got on great. We really are. Yeah, fantastic. I formed a particularly close bond with cameraman Pete Smithsonby, despite the fact that I didn't like his name. My view is that it had too many endings. It should either be Smithson or Smithby, not Smithsonby. If everyone used all the endings they liked, I'd be Alan Partridge and Steinbjoff. But I'm not. Smithsonby had served in the Falklands, and because I'm to the beach and see the penguins, he explained that the islands are home to 5 different types, and that his favourite had been the stunning Magellanic penguin. Svensicus magellanicus, found all over the Falklands. He added that they typically dig their burrows around the coastlines, preferring areas heavy and tussock. It was at this point I said I hadn't realised you got days off during the war. He said you don't get a full weekend, but you immediately folded. He knew I was a fan of wars and had just wanted to impress me. I was fine with that. I've never had a problem with people coming up with lies to impress me. It makes me feel important, and that's a feeling I enjoy. Besides which, Pete had a real flair for camera angles and was determined that the programme should feature absolutely loads of them. For me, the centrepiece of the episode was an interview I conducted in a leisure centre pool ever conducted while treading water. The idea had come to me the previous Tuesday during Weekly Bath. Weekly Bath is a practice I began several years earlier after some friends bought me a hygiene consultation for my 50th birthday. One of the many fascinating things I learned from Debbie that day, during what was a hugely interactive and at times quite emotional session, was that for Alan to be true, it comes to splashing up grub and grime from the bulk of Alan's body, but there are certain harder-to-reach locations that escape scot-free when gravity is allowed to decide where water goes and where it doesn't. And for these areas, only Weekly Bath will do. Block out an hour in the diary, half-fill the tub with the hottest water you could bear, and it's time to begin. Going at your own pace, taking care to perform the clean just as Debbie showed, is tucked up under your chin. Weekly Bath affords the cleaner a degree of access traditional stand-up showering simply cannot rival. And it was while performing the first of my chin-tuck arse cleans that the treading water idea came to me. When I pitched the concept to nervous physiotherapist Annabelle Swanson, she wasn't keen, but when I clarified and explained that I wasn't really asking her, I was telling her, she soon agreed on the A47 between Norwich and Blowfield. Drinks and canapes were laid on before the main event, and even though most members of Horizon Norfolk Speedway to Growth were driving, Brendan was friendly with the chief constable, so having a few was absolutely fine. I offered to say a few words by way of introduction, but Brendan said there was no need, and I was cool with that. And so, with bellies full of champagne and sliders, the title my employers had given the project, Welcoming Placid Lively, had, as things often do in the world of the creative process, slightly mutated into something fresher and better. Through various iterations, it had evolved like so. Welcoming, placid, lively. A welcoming place and lively. A welcoming place to live. Welcome to the place to live. Welcome to the place you live. Alan Partridge, welcome to the places of my life. Yes, the naming process had gone a bit Chinese whispery back there, but the final title better suited the show I'd created, which turned out to be a deeply personal journey around the places that had formed the child I was and the man I had become. 45 minutes later, and as Chumbawamba's top-thumping boomed out over the final credits, a side of me that I liked very much indeed. A conceiver, producer, writer, director, presenter, every decision had been mine. And to see my vision realised so superbly was deeply gratulating. Lynn checked word. Yet as I looked around the boardroom table with my eyes flicking my balls left and then right, something seemed off. Instead of the founders of Horizon Norfolk Speedway as a love letter to Norfolk, a deeply personal journey around the county I knew best, they saw as a self-serving puff piece, an attempt to promote not Norfolk, but brand Partridge. My blood ran cold, much as it had done for the cattle who were once slaughtered here for their beef and leather. Around the table were all 10 members of Horizon Norfolk. I recorded their reactions in my diary when I got home. Slow hand clap. Simon Cottingley Booth, can't remember. Tim Blair, 8 biscuit. Hal Topham, 8 biscuit. Len Dingle, 8 biscuit. Bob Dingle, drew finger across throated, you're dead gesture. Pat Stonk, 8 biscuit. As for O'Coyle, he was spitting feathers, with his sausage roll and burger hands balled up into meat and bruising encounter, metaphorically and literally. Bob Dingle pinched me on the arm as I left. But with a DVD of Places tucked under my arm, I had a calling card to get me back on the telly. Chapter 9. Fisherman's Friends. February 2022. What to be organisation project is the ceremony of groundbreaking, also known as the turning of the first sod. It's an event with a simple formula: gather some dignitaries, lay on some canopies, and encourage a smattering of applause as the first spade enters the ground. It was as my assistant and I discussed this, me in the shower, out outside the bathroom door, that she'd put 2 and 2 together, and as so often, made about organising an event to turn a sodomite, she assumed it was a reference to the gay conversion therapies with which she was so fascinated. Quite why she thinks I'd be organising an event to make gay men straight is anybody's guess, but it's put a spring in her step, and I know better than to mess with that. I send her off to the cash and carry to buy a big job lot of hot dogs and a nice big shovel. In the end, the start of renovations with a little fanfare, I'm pleased to be able to give a bit back by donating the 200 unused hot dog sausages to a local women's refuge. Footnote: keenly aware that the last thing these poor ladies wanted to see was a man, I put the salty rods of reconstituted meat into a holdall, slowed down as I approached, and threw the bag out of the window. It was a kind and tactful drive for stay of the rest of my life, and while I also said that on the day I decided to buy the lighthouse, and then again on the day the sale went through, I still feel it has a certain amount of validity in this context too. With 1 hour until the builders are due to arrive, and with my assistant gamely attempting to dismantle a gazebo in the driving rain, I sit in my car with a flask of hot chocolate and look past the flaming homophobe thing, and as the swelling violins of the Geordie crooner's crop-focused hit fills my Vectra, I enjoy the calm before the storm. In a matter of hours, workmen will be busying themselves here, setting up scaffolds, installing support beams, and talking at a volume that is inexplicable, even when you factor in the sound of hammers and drills. As the rain finally ceases because it's covered in some sort of slimy green, I want to say sea shit. God, I adore this building. Humans can have surgery to reverse the ravages of time. Footnote, provided they have the money or are owed a favour by a surgeon. Yet ultimately it is as futile as the efforts of King Cunt trying to hold back the tide. Unless you go for a chin tuck and age to the world. No, you cannot restore a person to youth. But what you can restore to youth is a lighthouse. I feel an all-consuming, or certainly 75 to 80% consuming urge to hug the thing and nip round to the seaside of the shaft to do so. If she had a hand, I swear I'd shake it, cheek stroke it, hair. Footnote: or the woman called Crystal I met online in 2008 that ended up being a man who was trying to diddle me. Opening the front door by employing a traditional 4-stage technique, put key in lock, turn key, turn handle, push door, I step inside. The best interior designers can paint pictures with their imaginations, seeing a not a ruined building generally only allowing me to conjure up vague shapes and blobs, so to me it looks rubbish. Paint flakes off walls, doors hang off hinges. It's the very definition of a doer-upper, although I hesitate to use that term because people who do are dicks. Yet what I have seen are the plans of my architect. Luton Greaves is one of the only architects in the UK specialising in lighthouse restaurant out. What I will say is that he's genial company and competitively priced. And if he does perhaps have a whiff of BO about him, footnote, he does, then I'd like to think I do my bit by sensitively passing the message on via coded deodorant mentions. Are you sure about the cantilevered staircase? What links these two aspects of the building? Are we certain, Mom? His designs will be implemented by boop boop this lot, the builders who are just pulling up in their Ford Transit. I don't look round to check, but I know it's a Ford Transit because I know what the horns of different vehicles sound like. And while some feel this is little more than a party trick, it's not. Imagine a hit-and-run incident where an elderly lady is fatally injured and the driver flees the scene. The incident had happened just outside my house, and what if the driver had inadvertently tooted his horn as he'd swerved to avoid the shopping bag-laden pensioner? And what if I'd been in the bath at the time, and the battery of my iPad had gone so I wasn't watching an episode of Columbo and could therefore hear that horn? I'd immediately be able to identify the model, relay it to the police, narrowing their search and leading to the rig. Cool. Turning to face the van, I see workmen spilling out. It is a Vauxhall Devara, but they have horns very similar to the Ford Transits. Next to arrive is my Dutch project manager, Jan Verhoeven. Bounding from his Audi, a huge Netherlands grin on his enormous, flat, pancakey face, Verhoeven thrust out a giant hand. Goodness me, that's a big hand. I find it breaking. Like all the Dutch, it's never really clear if Verhoeven understands that fuck is a swear word and therefore inappropriate to use in a professional setting. No matter, there is much to do, and I can always keep his misstep in my back pocket to use against him later, if needed. And so, with the uttering of a vulgarity that could one day cost a Dutchman his job, the build begins. What follows is a protracted dip I couldn't care less about. To me, soil is soil. If you throw one clump of dirt over another, there's something wrong with you, so I allow them to bicker without me, my eyes drifting seawards as they squabble. In the corner of my eye, a flash of something red. I swivel my head, and there, far away on the cliffs, is a woman. Ginger of hair and slight of build, she seems to shimmer in the light, looking what it would have needed about 8. Although, unlike the angels, this woman's smoking. Lost in thought, I unfurl my hand into an open palm, international sign language for higher. She takes stock of me and begins to open her hand too. Who are you waving at? Says my assistant. I turn to see that she's somehow wrested the spade from the hands of the builders. Oh, just that woman, I say. She's gone. Vanished like a speck of dirt in the corner of your eye after a really hard blink. Was she ever even there? What's going on? I am unsettled. But then another thought occurs to me, and a smile begins to form on my plump red lips. This is exactly what life is like here. A life far removed from the concrete certainties of the city. Here, the aberrant half-light when a mysterious creature like she would appear fleetingly to the lucky few. Right there in your eye line, then gone forever, like Natasha Kaplinsky. Don't know if you remember her at all. Far from shutting these thoughts out, I should be embracing them, rejoicing that in these faraway lands, you still find mysterious, ephemeral women wailing in Luton town centre, or a mermaid reclining on the Thames barrier would quite rightly shit you up. Here, it feels right, somehow. Yes, says my assistant when I tell her all this. Or your woman might have been a siren, luring impressionable men to a grisly demise on the seafront. Thanks for that, I say. What woman? I don't she no fucking woman. Next morning I stand on the headland and look at my property. It really is a fantastic piece of work, this home of mine. The air smells salty and fresh, the wind tousles my hair. But the liberal application of Elnet Diamond Hold hairspray this morn means I'm not overly worried about strands becoming displaced. I stand with my hands on my hips, legs wide in the power stance. Many decades ago, I myself had toyed with the idea of a career on the high seas. As a boy, stories of pirates and sea dogs had captured my imagination. I'd devoured tales of Ferdinand Magellan, Vasco da Gama, and Chris Columbus. With my school days coming to an end, and keen to follow in the footsteps of my nautical heroes, I applied to become a captain of a P&O, slipping and grabbing at the frozen chocolate surface, like when a horse eats a sugar cube. With the structural integrity of the chocolate compromised due to the thinning effect of my saliva, I was ready to tuck in, biting down hard on the chilled dairy treat, but I was never to finish it. Seeing that I'd been turned down by the two-lettered cross-channel operator, I was seized by a blinding rage. I hurled the hit mark. My dream had died, until now. For soon I would be something better than a P&O captain. I would basically be his boss. Feeling as good as any man can feel, I sip from a polystyrene cup of tea and breathe deeply. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The breath, not the tea. The tea would scald the nostrils. They say the best way to bound off towards town. First up is a local delicacy known as Huffkins. Kent's variation on the humble bread roll. Here the difference is a small indentation in the middle made by the baker's thumb. Legend has it that a baker's wife was so annoyed with him that she stuck her thumb into every one of his rolls before baking. Yet, to her surprise, rather than shun the spot of folklore, for you're having a laugh if you think I'm going to eat something a baker shoved his thumb in, so instead I settled for an unpenetrated bread roll from Sainsbury's, 60p. Next up is Appledore Chicken Pie, situated on the road, variously pronounced as the B2080, the B2080, the B2080, the B2080, and the B280. The pie that bears the village's name combines chicken and hard-boiled egg in a creamy herb sauce, but I don't like egg in pies, or even agree with egg in pies. I settle for chicken and mushroom, and jolly fine it is too. Sainsbury's, £3.49. By now, really getting a feel for the food heritage of the area, I'm keen to try more delicacies. Hailing from the south of Kent, lamb's dog or the eye of a swan, I settle instead for a lamb samosa, pack of 4, Sainsbury's, £3.99. It's been a fascinating morning in the supermarket, but by 11, it's time to head back to the lighthouse to peep out at my builders from an upstairs window. I arrive to find an unstamped envelope fixed to the door. On it, one word: welcome. Intriguing? If that sounds like a cult, and it does, well, fear not. The letter was signed by John and Julia Hurst, a retired couple who are keen National Trust members and amateur historians. John, far from being the charismatic leader of a quasi-religious sect, is a retired railway man who'd worked in procurement for Network South East, later Chiltern Railways. I chortled at the thought of enduring impressionableness, and it was damn near impossible to imagine an unassuming couple like the Hursts trying to lure me to a meeting just to meet the guys and have a chat, where I'd be made to feel genuinely welcome and would no doubt come again, only to find them on the third or fourth meeting, leading me into a velvet-lined room where Julia would be lashed to a bed, naked and chanting. Please, John would say. I'd look bemused. Please, he would say again. But they do it themselves, they say, but their past sins means the gods deemed them unworthy, which is why their seed has failed to take. Please, John would say again. I'd decline, but the elders would surround and jostle me and insist that only I am unsullied enough to placate the gods and fertilize Julia's womb with new life. Finally, I'd lose my temper and say, it's got nothing to do with the gods. The woman, again, that's what wouldn't happen, since the Friends of Abbotscliff is not a cult, but simply a group of local residents who've taken an interest in the Abbotscliff Lighthouse and seek to preserve it as a treasured piece of Kent heritage. They'd applied to Historic England with the hope of securing a grant for its restoration, but as it was built just after 1850, it had never been granted listed status, and their bid had been unsuccessful. Reaching out to me, they said they'd be delighted to provide any guidance I might need, and they could furnish me with a wealth of useful material, a cornucopia, they say, including original drawings and a treasure trove of old photographs. Well, I'm as pumped as Ross Kemp when his glenbuterol kicks in. I go inside and eat my buns at the window, smiling and making contented few friends. Who knows? I imagine there'll be a motley crew of characters, each with their own amusing idiosyncrasies, and I'll be like the Vicar of Dibley, there to raise an eyebrow and muck in. I quickly write back and say I'd love to meet them. Then I call my assistant. Time, I say, to arrange a public meeting. 12. What do you say to critics of the tattoo industry who say it's both an act of physical vandalism and a surefire way of catching AIDS? It was high summer 2012, and I should have been flushed by the success of Places of My Life. It should have been a turbocharged, breakneck, super fast, can we slow down a bit please, one-way trip to TV prominence. Called Sid. I use the word person advisedly, as I didn't want to get into a whole gender brouhaha. I could have taken a guess, but I know from some of the arguments Eamon Holmes has got into online that it is fraught with risk. What I do know is when Sid said, do you want to know my pronouns, I pretended I hadn't heard. Well, for a start, you don't catch AIDS. HIV, mate. Come on, mate, you know I can't use that. We talked about swearing. I mean it, fuck 'em. Please, we're going to have to start again now. Can you turn down the music? It's very loud. I became aware of someone else, a man who looked like a Bash Street kid, standing behind me doing the rabbit ears thing with their two fingers behind my head. I've never understood the meaning of this, and I'm certain they didn't either. I turned to admonish her, nodded sheepishly. When I turned back, the branded foam muff on my microphone was no longer there. All right, where's my muff? Your what, mate? My soft pink muff. It says East Anglia Live on it. Does it now? Yes, it does. The sniggering filled the room almost as much as their pungent BO. I felt like grabbing the tattoo, but they probably would have contracted HIV from sharing the needle, or actually liked the tattoo, which would have been even more annoying. The interview continued in this vein for another 20 minutes before I conceded defeat and slunk back to the van. Footnote. I'm pleased to say that my attitude towards the tattoo has softened over the years, while the likes of a spider's web on a lady's neck and upper thigh, particularly with properly rendered navities, can be nothing short of a delight. Why was I here? Well, it was part of a package of measures suggested by Silas McLean, a branding consultant who was, in his words, helping to imagineer a repositioning of my brand proposition. In the months after, Alan Partridge welcomed to the places of my life and the buzz, if any. Silas had been introduced to me by Hugh Asquith, a friend of mine from my Health and Rackets Club, who used Silas for his own corporate rebrand and was evangelical about the guy's abilities. Hugh ran a wealth management firm called Accrual Partners and sought a brand consultancy to help him attract a younger, less stuffy client base. At the time, I scoffed at the idea of spending 50 grand on that. The words have put a full stop at the end. Branding consultants are just snake oil salesmen, except they probably don't even call it snake oil. They've probably rebranded it as Serpentine Petroleum, or Python 3000, or Worm Lube. But Hugh wouldn't be deterred and insisted that Accrual Partners, one word, lowercase, as it was now called, was a new and exciting proposition, man immensely. He had a habit of saying, right, at the end of every sentence, which was obviously a deliberate calculation to make him seem inclusive, but actually screamed neediness. He also said, I know, right, instead of yes. But desperate times called for desperate measures, which was how I came to sit with him over a frothy coffee and talk about how I could reinvent myself for the modern TV comedian. He wanted me to embrace a kind of eccentric otherness cultivated by the likes of Giles Brandreth, Bargain Hunt's Tim Wonnacott, John McCririck, or David Starkey. You want to create a distinguished but careworn look, like a well-thumbed book. So stop trimming your eyebrows and nasal hair, stop dyeing your hair. I don't dye my hair. And embrace the elder statesman look. Great. You can see my point though. Yeah, and you can see I don't dye my hair. I listened to Silas's pitch with great interest and tremendous politeness, but felt I had to demur. Silas, that is a terrible idea, I said, and pointed out the great many aging presenters who'd stayed relevant, nay cool, by clinging to the last vestiges of youth. Jeremy Clarkson, James May, Richard Hammond, James Martin, Tom, where the hair has been permitted to dishevel into a gently rebellious length, favoured by the Bay City Rollers and Tarzan. This loose shoulder-length hair might seem more suited to a female divorcee called Trish, who's 50 and does step aerobics, than a man. But when accompanied by a craggy male skin, boot-cut jeans and a leather jacket with zip pockets on the sleeves, it turns into something dangerous and thrilling and into his 70s. James May, 74 or thereabouts, is how I imagine James Dean would look now if he'd been better at driving. Footnote. The late actor tragically died after his car collided with another driven by Donald Turnipseed. Odd, because Turnipseed Don is what a Scottish person would say Mr. Dean's car then did. Gotta try stand-up one day, I really have. By boomers and millennials alike, and could front an aftershave campaign if they wanted to. Pleasingly, McLean came round to my way of thinking, and we devised a campaign to reposition me in the minds of younger viewers. We agreed on 3 pillars: a fresh new look that would incorporate expensive denim and leather, a new lexicon drawn from a compendium of buzz phrases and sentence constructions that would resonate with younger audiences, content that was skewed towards what I call the Snapchat generation. Which was why I'd agreed to front Naked Knowledge, a web series for East Anglia Live, or what they call alternative knowledge. Naked Knowledge, a horrible title by the way, especially if you picture the nakedness taking place on market day when the average age of visitors was 65 or so, explored anything left field. The money was pitiful, but I enjoyed the rough and ready nature of the shoot and the chance to meet people with different backgrounds and perspectives. And while some of the stylistic choices weren't to my taste, incredibly fast editing, everyone laughing at everything always, and a camera so shaky I congratulated the cameraman on overcoming his Parkinson's diagnosis and continuing to find work, only to be told he was doing it on purpose, took its toll. After less than 5 episodes, it was 4, I began to feel like Bill Grundy interviewing the Sex Pistols, by turns appalled at their manner and goading them to behave worse. My friend Jackie is a magistrate at court in Norwich and steps into a similar role when confronted by any youth offender of colour, insisting they stand up straight or blow their nose and look at me when I'm talking to you. But this is not to throw the book at them. Metaphorically, although she wants to it literally because she'd forgotten not to have a drink at lunchtime. Throughout all this, I drew enormous comfort from the fact that I was still an attractive proposition for advertisers and sponsors. I was what the brand director of Giacomo described as a sexy offering. He was able to move 45 to 65-year-old males from slightly lower income bracket oil painting, certainly not first thing in the morning, when a combination of dehydration and gravity has made my eye bags swell and my lips dry up. And while one of the cleaners at the gym bumped into me while she was on her daughter's hen do and whispered that she'd once watched me towel off and decided she'd love to ride me like a peloton, I just took that with a pinch of salt. Don't touch what you can't afford, I joked. I'm a successful media personality and a Peloton static bike is going to set you back £1,300 minimum plus the monthly subscription fee. How are you going to stretch to that on, what, a tenner an hour? The point is, I was still able to command endorsements and attract sponsorship. Brand managers could see what commissioners would not, and not just because they were men of my age and bought each other drinks and played badminton together, or even woman friends, of which I have 6. These perks act as a buoyancy aid, a shot in the arm that gives me more than a little swagger. I don't mean I swan around with wads of banknotes, that would be crass, and besides, the endorsement deals weren't structured like that. But I'd flop out a gold card at any branch of Zizzy for a third off foods and soft drinks. I could treat my date to a shopping spree and go outdoors, and say, fill a bar complete with free towels and money off lunch. Clearly that opens doors. You become a guy people want to be around. It would not last. Why? Well, you'll find out in the next chapter, or rather the one after that, because, as I said, they alternate between 2 different timelines. Chapter 11. Friends of Abbott, and I am a man on a mission. I borrowed my assistant's shopping trolley, and I'm striding gaily, footnote, original meaning, along the seafront, my mind filled with errands, and my mouth filled with song, popular hits of the day, which I embellished with tiddly-om-pom-poms to give them a seaside inflection. Like its owner, the trolley is groaning. I piled the wheeled tartan cuboid full of croissants, pastries, fruits, twitmats in my garage, so I brought them with me too. A gift for each attendee to say thank you for your welcome, for today is the day I will meet the public. I've hired a village hall and flyed the local area to invite residents, and only residents please, bring a recent utility or council bill plus ID, to a meeting where I'll be delighted to present my ideas to regenerate the lighthouse and the local area. My project comes to public planning consultation, often refusing to grant access for construction vehicles, complaining about nuisances such as noise and rubble and visible bum cracks. Plus, I wanted to immerse myself in the community and, heck, maybe even make a few friends. So a meet and greet is fine by me. I'll be honest, I'm excited. I've always felt real kinship with people at the sea. As a child, I holidayed with Rosie of Cheek, with twizzle-up bags containing fish suppers. Campsite proprietors would welcome old and young alike, as long as you kept the noise down after 10 p.m. and weren't ethnic. In smoky pubs, trawlermen and smugglers would swap tales of barracuda and HM customs and excise. For me, coastal villages have a special romantic glow to them with their own mystical traditions and ways. Cooking shows from Padstow. 7, 8, 9 times a year, villagers glug cider, dress in terrifying wooden masks and bang tambourines as they eat vinegary food and sing shanties of the sea. Even a show like Broadchurch had its own seaside charm, which the paedophile child murder bit could do little to dent. Yes, I have fond memories of the seaside mindset that have propelled these twin cities to the top of the global league tables, certainly in the spheres of insurance services and mustard. Now I'm depressing the clutch, dropping things down to third or second, and taking life at a more leisurely pace. With the exception of oil-rich Aberdeen or fish-rich Peterhead or gay-rich Brighton, coastal idols live life with the gentle ebb. Now I'll be giving a bit back, devoting my remaining years to a life that has meaning. So yes, I intend to be part of the town. I'm not just buying the property willy-nilly. I've come here to add value. Listen to me. I'm making it sound like I'm assuming a white savior role. A prospector convincing yokels he can turn their town around if only they'll sign their land over to him. Showing around to wipe an old person's arse and unload the dishwasher. I'm not going to come in shouting the odds, asking why haven't you maintained X, or don't you know how to look after Y. I'm sure they have their reasons. I just want to introduce myself, say, hi, I'm Alan, I'm going to be living with you. We're neighbours now. And slowly but surely earn their trust, respect and fondness. I get to the hall early in the morning, giving myself a day to spruce the venue to my liking. Although the room I've hired was advertised as clean, I spend the day making it spick and where possible span. Maybe the seaside version of clean is a bit different to ours, I reason. They do seem weirdly fine with carbuncles and algae clinging to the hull of every boat in the harbour, whereas I would simply chip them off and scrub. A scarf is tied around my head to keep my hair out of my face, and yellow marigold, back its large, mitten my hands. Adorably, I'll blow strands of hair from my face as I survey my handiwork, something I've seen Anthea Turner do when she enters spring clean mode as a way to get dinner party guests to leave. Within hours, I really do have the place looking fantastic. I even plug in it in calmness, or it certainly does in my house. Footnote. My assistant and my housekeeper are generally at loggerheads, like two cats circling each other and hissing, sometimes literally. Their beef is ostensibly about whether you would wash up with a plastic rod inside the kitchen sink. My assistant, yes. Rosa, no. But I know it runs deeper than that. There's a classic power struggle. Like the Thai waitress, the phrase "you know like" can sound confrontational, aggressive even, when actually she's just wondering why you left your chicken satay. The same applies to a Filipino like Rosa, and my assistant is no angel herself. She should try keeping her nose out once in a while. If Rosa wants to clean the house in a t-shirt without a bra underneath, that's her business. You shouldn't be looking. Still, it's completely forgetting that Rosa would be in that day, which would surely mean fireworks. I jumped in the Vectra and hightailed it after her, eking whatever I could out of the 2.8-litre, 250 brake horsepower V6 engine, in accordance with the relevant speed limits. I pulled into the drive, ran up the gravel, burst through the door to find a scene of perfect tranquility. The house smelt of eucalyptus and freesia, of Philippine cuisine, and if it had any dishes that weren't spicy. It was all very cordial, and I immediately put that down to the quelling effect of the plug-in freshener. These days I stock up. Here at the village hall, I have these plugged in but turned off at the wall. I'm not anticipating they'll be needed, and I would soon use them only if necessary, since the aroma, and my apologies to the guys at Airwick, is nasally. What else? Ah yes, I've created a brief soundtrack based on the theme of Friends. With more players, they guzzle smoothies and chew pastry, subconsciously making them warm to me. This will play in the background as people arrive. You've got a friend, Carol King. You're my best friend, Queen. That's what friends are for, Stevie Wonder. I'll stand by you, the Pretenders, and with a little help. I set about de-stacking and arranging the chairs. This is to be an inclusive, welcoming space, so I arranged them in a way which I think will be conducive to cordial conversation. Instead of rows of chairs facing a stage in an adversarial layout, I arranged them in a big circle, a configuration I learnt at a support group I briefly attended, and I've been feeling crummy. More about that later, maybe. And which also... Whoa, 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 whoa! I'm shouting, I have to. Friends? That's a laugh. For the gathering has descended into a hostile barrage of questions. Questions that are raining down on the presentation proper, pebble dashing the smooth putty of my talk. Suddenly, these locals have turned from interested stakeholders to the stakeholders you get in ham questions like a pack of feral dogs. It's questions, questions, questions. Chillingly couched behind a veneer of friendliness, bubble-wrapped in what I call weaponized politeness. Then Fogel does it a lot. I'd started promptly enough, smiling as each person moseyed in. John and Julia Hurst were the first to arrive, and Julia squeezed my hand as she shook it, which I thought was seriously classy. Then there was a couple who'd only recently moved to the area, and perhaps most mysteriously, a flame-haired, i.e. ginger, woman in her mid-30s, with large eyes and a watchful bearing. She'd responded to my smile with a sudden glance away, the skittish shyness of a woodland animal, and I noticed that she looked back. When I smiled at her a second time, slightly harder than I had before, she smiled too, and the woman I'd seen on the cliffs that day, she was real. She was really real. I composed myself. Grab a seat, Red, I drawled. I've always wanted to call a ginger woman Red, and now I had. Who was she, this intriguing, orangey woman? Attendance had swelled to 10 or a dozen, and although we waited for any stragglers, none straggled all. One Abbott's Cliff. One, because I wanted to move forward with one shared vision for what this area can be, and Abbott's Cliff because the area is called Abbott's Cliff. I ran them through a PowerPoint of what the work would entail and ended on a picture of the finished lighthouse, complete with those ghostly people architects always put in their drawings. A young couple holding hands, a boy with a balloon, a men, but they almost felt like friends to me. I finished with a gesture that was meant to suggest voila, but came out more as ta-da! Then I waited for applause. Instead, a few exaggeratedly thoughtful nods. I found myself adding, remember, this is your lighthouse. Not legally, it's mine, but it belongs to the town just as much as it belongs to me. I'm a retired dog trainer more than a retired school teacher. Oh, no, you're not, I think, before realizing she has. A couple of anomalies. Anomalies? I actually laughed when she said this, but she stood up and unfurled a roll of blown-up photographs. She laid them out on the table, slap bang on top of my drawings. You'll see here the lantern room. That would have been accessed by a ladder, she said. We actually had to buy a tight spiral staircase. She seemed not to notice rescuing her photos, which weren't even in colour, and putting them atop the pile. And again, the lantern room, she said. You'll see that was empty bar the lamp itself, which meant the keeper had space to walk round it. And you'll see here, I interrupted, which is something I never do, there's now banquette seating around the circumference, so you can look out with a glass of wine. Or, of course, I wasn't born for another 90 years. Originally, you wouldn't. Originally, the cliff top wouldn't have had a main road. Originally, the sea wouldn't have had a nuclear deterrent. Originally, there wouldn't have been a contraceptive pill or cars or contact lenses or iPhones. Am I allowed to bring my iPhone into the lighthouse, Julia? Am I allowed to say OMG in there? Am I allowed to use an electric razor? Julia glowered at me. John looked at his shoes. And down a bit, please. Did he say the light's going to be on? How bright is the light going to be? Can you say that bit again? Do you mind if I ask a quick question? Won't the light keep people awake? What do you mean by pathway to Abbott's Cliff 2.0? Will there be any consultation? Can you speak up a bit? I expected some pushback, maybe a modicum of wariness, but this fang-bent way I look, my vision is assailed by the face of an angry woman. Left, angry woman. Right, angry woman. Straight ahead, angry woman. The effect reminiscent of a recurring nightmare I suffered after getting into an argument on Mumsnet. Not all of the attendees are women. I will not be accused of chauvinism. I'm just saying it seems like they are. Suggesting that the rotating light would light up not just the sea, but neighbouring homes and countryside, which would upset the sleep of local children, and, hilariously, cattle. Others seem to take issue with my harsh suggestion to monetize the lighthouse and may, God have mercy, turn a small profit by turning the lower floors into a Wetherspoons, or possibly an all-bar one. I was happy to discuss which of these it should be. Others raised his hand. What does it mean when it says pathway to Abbott's Cliff 2.0, he says. I can't help but sigh. I haven't even arrived at that bullet point. They're jumping ahead. It's just a normal pathway. Like a coastal path. No, more like a strategic vision, that kind of pathway, I say. Shall we just stick to the points in the order they're bulleted? I think we should stick to the points in the order they're bulleted. I'm not sure. They really were playing the greatest hits when it came to question rhetoric. Deep breath. Time to put this pressure cooker under the cold tap. I smile. I am pleased to say my attorney here has inspected my application in detail and will be able to put any concerns to bed. I instantly regret this. The person I gesture towards is far from an attorney. She's merely my assistant whose legal quality at the back looks like it could be lifted off, but the smile that plays on her lips tells me this is a role she's dreamt of, and that concerns me. She stands up, buttons the buttons of a buttoned jacket, and begins to pace, the dull clack of her 1-inch heel echoing around the room. She stops, turns to face the group and takes a breath. Ladies and gentlemen, it goes without saying that your concerns will be unintended. She pauses, waiting for the laugh that is never going to come. Dreams of building something bigger than they are. On that, she sweeps her eyes theatrically around the room. Who among us has not? Actually, she's not my attorney, just an assistant. I told a lie, I blurt out, simply unable to face whatever feeble characterization she was about to attempt. You can sit down now, I say to my assistant, and she clomps back to her chair. Apologizing is for the weak, so instead I suggest they calm down. Big mistake. Julia starts putting on her coat. A renovation that fails to respect the building's wonderful heritage isn't something we can support, she says. Why would I need your support? I ask quite reasonably. Come on, John. Yeah, go on, John, I say. Off you pop, John. Thanks for coming, John. Do you normally say nothing when you go to public meetings with your wife, John? At which point John hung his head even more, and I felt a bit bad. I'd taken out my frustration on a profoundly weak man. I'm delighted to say that time is up, as I only have the hall until 9 p.m. So I ushered the seething mob into the night and shut the door behind. Well, that went badly, I think. Stupid fucking bastards. Rude people. Rarely have I felt so despondent. Yes, she says. Yes, I say a touch redundantly. We look at one another. You're not going to give me the third degree as well, are you? Me? No, I'm not here for the meeting. I've just come to lock up the hall. Chapter 12. Marvin. April 2016. Can television coming? Footnote. Date-focused readers will have noticed a time jump from 2012, the previous chapter of this strand of the dual narrative, to 2016 in this one. Please don't be alarmed with this. The nature of biographies is to document the peaks and troughs of the journey, the ups and downs of the roller coaster. Fortunately, for whatever reason, the years 2012 to 2016 were like the lower troughs to document. The trajectory of my television career flatlined, neither rising nor falling, so it's not germane to this story. Obviously things happened in that time. London Olympics, Cameron won majority for Conservatives, grew hair down to shoulder, became briefly nationally famous due to armed siege, friend died, Bradley Walsh quit Law and Order, UK flight MH370 went missing over Savile but couldn't go. So, like the bits in the X Factor where the contestants visit their hometown and introduce us to their families, let's skip this bit and get on with the decent stuff. I wasn't pulling up any trees speed-wise, but I was getting there, and that was the important thing. Meanwhile, I was still leeching salary from North Norfolk Digital. Then, one day, came a class of kids from England in the last 3 years. Not helped, one assumes, by local news reports of their pupils smoking next to a war memorial and leaving cigarette butts on a monument to the fallen. That's to say nothing of an art teacher who was caught in the shower block on a school trip to France, chatting to a class of girls with his top off, not long after being asked to leave his previous Catholic school for getting one of the mums pregnant. As I say, I shot and had left them unchaperoned for their live interview. The guy, Mr. Crew, had left the building, later claiming he'd popped outside to take an urgent phone call, but apparently a phone call that left him smelling of fags. I said, you must have had a strong signal, but he didn't get the pun, because signal sounds exactly the same as signal, the very word on which the pun was based. Footnote. It see, one boy in particular, a yob named Marvin, behaved appallingly. Whether it's because he was born demented or became defective thanks to parental negligence, I won't speculate. He's a kid. He deserves a break. These days, Marvin works in a kids' trampolining centre. It's his job to ensure the trampolines are being correctly used and that the patrons are wearing the prescribed trampolining socks. Hurtful. I've never spoken about this before, but earlier that afternoon, I'd been outside in the car park checking my car was locked because I was worried my car wasn't locked. While there, I saw a teenage boy standing all alone. I could tell something was upsetting him, so I offered him a piece of chewing gum and took one myself. And we stood together in companionable silence for a while, both enjoying our gum. In response to mine, because that would have been one nod too many, but the point had been made. He knew I wasn't talking about the crummy weather. He knew what I was really saying was, whatever it is, you can get through it. Whether you're struggling at school, getting hassle from bullies, wetting the bed. If you ever need to talk about anything to anyone, you know where to find me. It was a touching gesture and something I didn't have to do. Context as to who was the good guy and who was being out of order. As I say, it's not something I've mentioned before, and might even be something that Marvin disputes ever happened. But if he wants to demand a retraction, particularly about the wetting the bed bit, which I suppose he might think was a cheap shot had it not happened, which it did, then he's more than welcome to use some of his trampolining money to instruct a libel lawyer. And instead, only saw what I concede could be construed as cross words. Of course, it was nothing of the sort. What happened? You'd have to ask Marvin, really. For reasons known only to him, he made a loud sheep noise mid-broadcast, aimed squarely, it seemed, at me. I responded with a brief deconstruction of his slur and a few comedic additions of my own to add theirs. So you can imagine my bewilderment when, moments later, I was asked to speak to the station controller, Jason, who immediately sent me home, where I should await further news. I couldn't believe my ears. Sent home, I demanded. Await further, I exclaimed. News, I wailed. Couldn't they see this was just banter? And even if it wasn't, surely I'd have been within my rights of livestock to be drawn into an intimate relationship with a local broadcaster. However sincerely held his or her affection for the sheep. But as I say, this wasn't that. This was just a bit of fun. 2 days later, I was sent a formal letter by HR detailing my crimes with a transcript of the offending segment. As I read it, my eyes screamed with horror. There wasn't a fair reflection of what it sounded like in reality. Equally, they'd transcribed things in a way that didn't reflect what any reasonable listener could hear on the tape. So I sent it back to them with some very light amendments designed to remove inaccuracies and provide guidance on tone. Incredibly, they insisted I had said "you dick" to Marvin, when what I actually said was "ya dick," because I went to with my amendments.
Marvin makes an aggressive bleating noise. Partridge. All right.
Laughs Partridge gently.
Who did that? Was that you?
Partridge smiles.
Marvin. Yeah.
Snaps Marvin.
Partridge. What's that supposed to mean?
Inquires Partridge.
Need for that, mate.
Partridge chuckles.
Marvin. Sorry.
The word was spat like venom.
Partridge. That's cool. That's cool.
Says Partridge, meaning it.
Marvin. Didn't mean to insult your
Fucking.
girlfriend. Partridge. My girlfriend's not a Partridge. Yeah. Shut up, Marv.
He says, ribbing the girl for her concern. An object was thrown at Partridge's head. Had it been made of sharp steel, it could have cut his ear off or fractured his skull. The fact that it was a ball of paper was pure fluke.
Partridge.
Ya dick,
Calling me a sheep shagger.
gasps curiously.
Marvin. Don't know.
Mate,
Partridge. Yeah, I think maybe you're a sheep shagger.
have a